Chapter 1520. Tang Zheng jumped off the cliff without any hesitation. To him, Xiao Bai was like a family member. He would definitely not watch him die. The wind was bitterly cold, causing people's cheeks to hurt. Xiao Bai and Tang Zheng both knew how to fly. However, at the top of the cliff, even this ability to fly was suppressed. Otherwise, why would they go through so much trouble? On the ground, when everyone saw this scene, they were scared out of their wits. The elder ancestor could not help but shout, "Your Majesty!" However, when they saw the scene of Tang Zheng jumping down together, they were all deeply shocked. A person could risk his life to save others. How selfless was this? The elder ancestor could not help but understand Xiao Bai. He could die for Tang Zheng without hesitation, and Tang Zheng could also die for him. This kind of relationship was too precious. However, they did not have time to think about the relationship between the two. What they should do now was the most important thing. Hurry and save them. The elder ancestor roared. His body quickly grew like a spring bed, trying to catch them. As Xiao Bai fell, he looked at Tang Zheng and shook his head with tears in his eyes. "Master, why do you have to do this? For me, it is not worth sacrificing your life." Tang Zheng stared at him with a burning gaze. He grabbed Xiao Bai's hand and said, "You are my family. How can I watch you die?" "Master, meeting you is Xiao Bai's fortune." Whoosh! Suddenly, a white cloud appeared without warning. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He shouted, "Somersault cloud!" Whoosh! The somersault cloud immediately flew to their feet. Bang! The two landed on the soft somersault cloud, not suffering any injuries. Wow! Waves of exclamations sounded from the ground. They did not expect that there would be a cloud to catch the two. Wild Dog remembered this cloud. Back in the wildlands, Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai rode on a cloud. At the same time, they were amazed in their hearts. What was the origin of this cloud? It could actually fly freely. Tang Zheng secretly regretted that he had forgotten about the somersault cloud. The somersault cloud was not an ordinary Dharma treasure. In the space of the Langya Pavilion, the somersault cloud could fly freely. Although this suicide valley was very strange, the somersault cloud might be able to fly. Blinded by a single leaf, Tang Zheng made a common mistake. Fortunately, the somersault cloud had automatically saved them at the critical moment, saving them from the danger of being smashed to pieces. Xiao Bai jumped up excitedly and cheered, "Master, we are fine now, all thanks to the somersault cloud." Tang Zheng nodded happily. "Yes, somersault cloud. Thank you." The somersault cloud shook a few times as if it was enjoying their praise. With the somersault cloud, this cliff is no longer unreachable. Tang Zheng was in high spirits. He pointed at the source of the waterfall and commanded, "Somersault cloud, go there." Whoosh! With a piercing sound, the somersault cloud soared into the sky and flew to the source of the waterfall in the blink of an eye. The bright sunlight was dazzling and instantly covered their bodies. The world at the source of the waterfall was bathed in the sunlight, blooming with a dazzling brilliance. Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai widened their eyes and admired the source of the waterfall. The two looked at each other and widened their eyes at the same time. How could this be?" Xiao Bai exclaimed. Tang Zheng's shock could be imagined. What kind of place was this? In the past, in their impression, since this was the source of the waterfall, and the waterfall had always been highly toxic, this place must be a desolate place. However, what they saw was not like this at all. This was actually a paradise. Here, flowers were blooming, fruits were abundant, vegetation was lush, and the air was unbelievably fresh. It was like a fairyland. Xiao Bai jumped off the somersault cloud and looked around, unable to hide his excitement. "Master, this place is much better than below. Moreover, the spirit energy here is very dense. It can allow one's cultivation to increase quickly." Xiao Bai said excitedly. Tang Zheng did not comment and said, "Let's check this place first." This place was like a small mountain. Although the area was not small, they did not spend too much time checking it. The source of the endless waterfall was a spring. Water continuously flowed out of the spring and then flowed down 3,000 feet into the deep pool. The spring water was extremely clear and the poison had been neutralized. Xiaobai pointed to the spring and said, "This waterfall is the source of the poison. After so many years, it has not been neutralized. I guess that the traitor must have poisoned it here." The poisonous water fell from the sky and flowed through every piece of land below, causing this suicide valley to be completely contaminated by the poison. Once my ancestors entered this land, without the antidote, they would immediately be harmed by the poison. Tang Zheng nodded his head slightly, admitting that Xiao Bai's analysis was very reasonable. However, he still had a lot of questions in his heart. For example, this was the source of the poison, so why was it flourishing? This did not make sense at all. Xiao Bai also thought of this point. He looked around with a strange expression, shook his head bitterly, and sighed. Strange, truly strange. We checked it just now, but we didn't find any clues at all. Tang Zheng said doubtfully. Xiao Bai said, "That's right, the vegetation is lush, and there isn't even a bare rock. Oh no, other than this stubborn rock here, there isn't even a rock anywhere else." Tang Zheng subconsciously looked in the direction of Xiao Bai's finger. There was a rock standing at the mouth of the spring. This rock was about the height of a person and was very inconspicuous. It was no different from an ordinary rock. Tang Zheng looked at it a few more times, reached out his hand, and touched it a few times, and could not help but exclaim, "This seems to be a heaven and earth profound stone." Heaven and earth profound stone? Xiao Bai also exclaimed. Xiao Bai was no stranger to heaven and earth profound stone. He quickly touched it a few times, and sure enough, this was really a heaven and earth profound stone. Back then, we searched for so long and only managed to gather 99 pieces of heaven and earth profound stone. I never thought that there would actually be a piece of heaven and earth profound stone here. Could it be that the heaven and earth profound stone came from the sky? Tang Zheng said curiously. No, at least in my memory, there is no heaven and earth profound stone. Xiao Bai immediately retorted. Perhaps, when the elder ancestor comes up later, we can ask him. The heaven and earth profound stone is very useful to us. Moreover, the heaven and earth profound stone is related to the stairway to heaven. If other people use it to build the stairway to heaven, then wouldn't it completely connect the two worlds? This is temporarily not beneficial to us. Master, you want to keep this heaven and earth profound stone to prevent it from falling into the hands of others. Xiao Bai understood Tang Zheng's thoughts. Tang Zheng smiled, reached out his hand and touched the stubborn rock. His wrist lit up. This was the Summer heavens taking effect, trying to keep it. However, the stubborn rock did not move at all. The light of the Summer heavens completely enveloped it, but it was completely useless. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1521. This miraculous scene completely stunned Tang Zheng and Little White. They stared at each other with their eyes wide open, as they did not expect such an outcome. Xiao Bai exclaimed, "Master, why don't I pick it up first?" He hugged the stone without any explanation and grimaced. He seemed to have used all his strength, but it did not move at all. This stone seemed to be connected to the earth and could not be moved at all. Xiao Bai dejectedly circled the stone twice and clicked his tongue in wonder. Strange, strange, this stone does not look big, but I can't pick it up. Tang Zheng's eyes were like lightning. Suddenly, he took out the hidden profound sword and slashed at the stone. Sparks flew everywhere, but the stone was not damaged at all. Hiss! He sucked in a breath of cold air. A peerless divine weapon like the hidden profound sword could not even leave a mark on the stone. Xiao Bai was also shocked and said, "Master, how can this be? This heaven and earth or is not ordinary. It is quite different from the heaven and earth or we have seen before." Tang Zheng pondered for a long time and said. Xiao Bai nodded in agreement. "Then what should we do?" "Don't worry about it for now. It is a stone, after all, a dead object. It is not related to the big picture." Tang Zheng had no choice but to give up. Little White unwillingly looked at the mischievous rock a few times, but could only resentfully give up. Looking around, it changed the topic and said, "There are flowers and fruits here. It's simply a mountain of flowers and fruits." Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. "Then why don't we call it Mountain of Flowers and Fruits?" Mountain of Flowers and Fruits, a good name. Xiao Bai's eyes lit up. Suicide Valley. This name is too unpleasant to hear. From now on, this place will be called Mountain of Flowers and Fruits. The two stepped on the somersault cloud and flew back to the waterfall. Everyone hurriedly greeted them and looked at them and the somersault cloud in surprise. The two briefly explained what they saw at the source of the waterfall. Everyone was amazed and wanted to go up and investigate. But they could not go up by themselves, so they looked at Tang Zheng and the somersault cloud, especially the somersault cloud, which had given them a huge shock. Their transcendent artifacts were unable to fly in the air, but this white cloud could fly without any hindrance. It completely outclassed their transcendent artifacts, and they couldn't help but be convinced. Somersault cloud, change. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and shouted. The somersault cloud expanded rapidly and occupied more than half of the area below the waterfall. Come on up. Everyone looked at each other. Then, they boarded the somersault cloud with excitement and caution. The somersault cloud whizzed past and flew directly to Huagua Mountain. When everyone stepped foot on this piece of land, they looked left and right in amazement. A moment later, everyone returned to the mischievous rock. All of them clicked their tongues in wonder. The place where they had lived for so many years actually had such a place. It was truly unexpected. I don't think there's anything special about it. Mist pouted and said with disappointment. The old ancestor's eyes were deep as he swept his gaze around and said, Fog, you're wrong. This place is even more mysterious than below. Don't you realize that after coming here, your powers are greatly restricted? Huh. After the old ancestor's reminder, everyone also noticed some clues. When they were under the waterfall, although they couldn't fly in the air, their powers weren't restricted. The battle was still very smooth. But at this moment, they had actually become like ordinary people. They couldn't even circulate their powers normally. This is too strange. Wild Dog smacked his lips and exclaimed. The world was big, and there were all kinds of strange things. This time, they had really broadened their horizons. The scenery above is good, and the spiritual energy is abundant. Why don't you live here? It's better than the darkness below. Xiaobai suggested. The old ancestor said with a troubled expression, Your Majesty, although this suggestion is good, it is not realistic. We can't fly in the air, so it's very difficult to go up and down. Therefore, it's more convenient to live under the waterfall. Xiaobai patted his head and said resentfully, That's right. I almost forgot the most important point. However, to be able to come here in my lifetime, it can be considered as fulfilling a wish. The old ancestor said with relief. This place will be called Mountain of Flowers and Fruit from now on, and this Suicide Valley will also be changed to Mountain of Flowers and Fruit. The name Suicide Valley sounds too strange, Xiaobai said with certainty. The others naturally had no objections. There was nothing else on the mountain, so everyone naturally returned to the bottom of the waterfall. Now that the divine armament bloodthirsty scepter had become Xiao Bai's magic treasure, the poison on this land could be dispelled at any time, so they could leave this land at any time. However, the old ancestor did not leave, because the outside world was too dangerous. Moreover, they were not prepared to fight against the traitor forces. Xiao Bai was very clear about this point. Although the old ancestor insisted on letting Xiao Bai lead everyone to fight against the traitor forces, Xiao Bai refused without hesitation. He did not want his people to die in vain. Only by knowing yourself and knowing your enemy can you win 100 battles. He still wanted to go to the enemy's territory to find out more before making a decision. The old ancestor was very gratified by Xiao Bai's calm way of doing things, but he was also very ashamed. After all, after so many years, His Majesty had returned, and he was not ready. Xiao Bai comforted him for a long time before dispelling the old ancestor's thoughts. Time was of the essence. Tang Zheng had been away from the human world for too long. In order to avoid a fire in his backyard, he had to return to the human world as soon as possible. The old ancestor couldn't persuade Xiao Bai, so he compromised and said, Your Majesty, if no one serves you with your identity, wouldn't we not be fulfilling our duties? Therefore, let the fog follow you. She has been outside a few times, and, with her around, It should be more convenient for her to do things. This, Xiaobai didn't know how to refuse, so he turned to look at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng thoughtfully looked at the fog and nodded his head without leaving a trace. With the fog as a guide, they might be able to avoid some trouble. Xiaobai reluctantly said, "All right then." Only then did the old ancestor heave a sigh of relief. If he really let Xiaobai and the others leave alone, he would probably continue to blame himself. "You guys stay here and don't go outside for the time being. Wait for our news," Xiaobai warned. Feeling Xiaobai's concern, the old ancestor said excitedly, "Your Majesty, please rest assured. We have been hiding here for so many years. It will not be so easy for the enemy to find us." Under everyone's gaze, Tang Zheng, Xiaobai, the fog, and the wild dog all left. They came in a hurry and left in a hurry. They stayed here for less than a day. With the bloodthirsty scepter, it was very convenient for them to leave Suicide Valley. Moreover, Xiaobai could open up a secluded path for them to enter and exit without being affected by the poison. Of course, this path was very hidden and was not easy to be discovered by outsiders. It was also covered with various divine abilities to ensure that nothing would go wrong. Chapter 1522. Looking from afar, the imperial city was magnificent. It stood tall between the heavens and the earth. It was so vast that one could not see the end of it. The buildings of different heights were stacked on top of each other, blocking a lot of sight. There was no way to see all the corners clearly. The imperial city was a no-fly zone. Other than the imperial family and the imperial guards, no one else was allowed to fly. Otherwise, if they were discovered, they would be executed. This was to ensure the safety of the imperial city. The fog had been to the imperial city before and was familiar with the place. He warned them, and they all remembered it. Although Wild Dog had lived in the outer sky for hundreds of years, he had only seen the imperial city from afar. He had never dared to enter. That would be walking right into a trap. But no one dared to do that. Wild Dog looked around guiltily and said nervously, "Senior, it's too dangerous for us to go in like this." After witnessing Tang Zheng's various tricks and techniques, Wild Dog did not dare to act rashly in front of him. Originally, Wild Dog's ugly face always attracted people's attention. But when they were about to reach the imperial city, no one paid attention to him, because his ugliness paled in comparison. The people on the road were much uglier than him. The royal city was the core of the outer sky, and there were countless races that came and went. Many of these races didn't fully transform into human form, so their appearances were all strange. Wild Dogs, on the other hand, were much more pleasing to the eye. Wild Dog could not help but straighten his body, raising his eyebrows and exhaling. The tension all over his body seemed to relax a lot, and this place could not help but have a trace of friendliness and naturalness. The fog said in a low voice, "Everyone, the imperial city is heavily guarded. Although the traitor has taken over the world, his descendants still feel uneasy. They're very cautious." What's the point of living in fear like this?" Tang Zheng curled his lips and said jokingly. Xiaobai looked at the imperial city angrily. In the middle of the imperial city, there was a pillar of light that shot up to the sky. At the top of the pillar, there seemed to be a building, but it was not clear. "I will make them live in fear in the days to come. In fact, they will be scared out of their wits." Xiaobai suppressed his anger and roared like a wild beast. Tang Zheng patted Xiaobai's shoulder and said, "Their carefree days are over. Don't worry, we will definitely take back everything that belongs to you." Xiaobai nodded heavily and pointed to the top of the light pillar, where the clouds and mist lingered. "That is the core of the imperial city, the imperial palace." When Tang Zheng saw this for the first time, he couldn't help but be shocked. The heavens beyond heaven's imperial palace was built in the clouds. "Then let's make Sky City," the mist introduced. Everyone in the outer heaven knew about Sky City's illustrious reputation because it was located high in the clouds, looking down on all living beings in the world. What a magical place! Tang Zheng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He recalled the mountain peak that he saw floating in midair. It seemed that things in the beyond heaven liked to develop in the sky. The few of them carefully passed through layers upon layers of checks before they entered the Imperial City. The Imperial City was a mixed bag of good and bad people, so it wasn't difficult to sneak in. This inspection seems to be stricter, the mist said doubtfully. Of course they are strict, because they already know that the Imperial family has returned. Naturally, they are facing a great enemy. Tang Zheng said without surprise. Last time, when he and Xiao Bai's consciousness crossed over, they used the identity of the Imperial family to scare off the enemy. Naturally, the people in Sky City also knew. That's why they mustered so many people wanting to get information from the righteous cultivators. It was a pity that those people didn't know anything. It was precisely because of this that they were more worried. The fear of the unknown was truly frightening. On both sides of the street, there were many shops, but every face was more or less nervous and fearful. The corners of their eyes kept glancing around, as if they were afraid that something would happen. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, there was the sound of stairs. Everyone scattered like birds and beasts, retreating to the sides of the street. The mist hurriedly pulled the few of them to a corner. Several pairs of eyes looked warily at the direction of the wind where the sound came from. A few gigantic unicorns that were neither donkeys nor horses, their bodies covered in scales that glittered with cold light, were charging straight towards them. Riding on the unicorns were several majestic-looking, tall, and strong fellows that were wrapped in armor from head to toe. A guy who looked like a commander pointed his finger in a direction. His subordinates flew up from their mounts and flocked to the place where his finger pointed. They stood in front of the few passers-by and directly grabbed them without asking any questions. "Ah, spare us, Lord City Guard. We are all His Majesty's subjects, not the opposition." A few of them cried out. However, it was of no use. They were still dragged away like dragging dead dogs. Then, they were hung on the backs of their mounts and dragged on the street. No one dared to resist. Instead, they kept shrinking into the corner, as if they were afraid that bad luck would befall them. Seeing this, Xiao Bai clenched his fists. He could no longer control his anger and wanted to rush over to stop all this. Mist hurriedly pulled him back and anxiously shook her head. She advised, "Your Majesty, don't. These are all city guards. They are responsible for patrolling the Imperial City. If you provoke them, a large number of city guards will come immediately. Even the Imperial guards will be summoned. At that time, we will be in danger in the Imperial City. Are we just going to watch them do violence?" Xiao Bai asked. "This is not the first time, but what can we do? In the future, when His Majesty takes back the Outland, all this will naturally be put to an end," Mist said earnestly, constantly hinting at Tang Zheng with her eyes. She knew very well that only when Tang Zheng gave the order, Xiao Bai would listen to it. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, stared at the scene without blinking, not saying a word. Wild Dog said calmly, "What is there to be surprised about? In the Outland, except for the royal family and the nobles, the rest are ants. They can kill and rob at will. This has been going on for many years." Whitey glared fiercely at the Wild Dog. Wild Dog's heart trembled. He hurriedly shrank his neck and said stubbornly, "I am telling the truth. I have traveled far and wide and have seen too many of these things." Tang Zheng had been silent. His eyes were fixed on the scene on the street. Without a doubt, looking at the adept manner of the other party, this was not the first time. Wild Dog was definitely not lying. Now, the official was really unscrupulous and so violent. Since this was the case, it laid a solid foundation for Xiao Bai's return. The one who wins the hearts of the people controls the world. Perhaps the people in power did not understand the true meaning of this sentence. "Xiao Bai, don't be impulsive. We have more important things to do. The crimes they have committed, we will remember them. Justice will come eventually, it is just late. Moreover, justice will come soon." Tang Zheng finally opened his mouth. Xiao Bai's momentum suddenly dropped. He took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He knew that his master was far-sighted and he was too rash. He gritted his teeth, and all his anger passed from the soles of his feet to the rocks on the ground. Crack, crack, crack. The rocks cracked inch by inch, reaching deep into the ground. In order to avoid being discovered, they left the street from a remote place without leaving a trace. As soon as they left, the group of city guards rushed to the place where they had just stood. Oh, whoa. Suddenly, the mount raised its front hooves high. Half of its body was pulled up by its master, and it stopped. Bang! The city guard jumped off his mount and landed in front of Xiao Bai. His eyes were bright and full of expression, as if there were lightning flashing. He stared straight at the cracked stone slabs. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1523. The city guard's eyes were like torches as he stared at the cracked ground. With a point of his finger, a ray of light landed on the ground, and a huge hole was torn open, revealing what was below. It had completely melted and turned into magma, emitting a blazing aura. The other city guards exclaimed and asked in surprise, "Sir, what's going on?" The city guard's eyes were deep, and there was a trace of imperceptible fear in his eyes. He pondered for a long time without saying a word. Only he knew that the imperial family had returned. The rumor was indeed true. The imperial family had really returned. Only the imperial family could do this. The legendary flame that could burn everything in the world looked like this. He took a deep breath and suppressed the fear in his heart. He had never seen the imperial family, but he had heard a lot of rumors about them. The more the government suppressed them, the more there was a market for such rumors. Therefore, as the city guard, he knew more details than others. He also knew that the current His Majesty did not rightfully possess all that he had today. He straightened his body, glanced at his subordinates majestically, and ordered, "Pass down my order. Seal off this street and arrest all suspicious people." He did not need to give a reason at all. As soon as the order was passed down, the street was immediately in chaos, and screams of alarm rose and fell. Many innocent people were arrested. Fortunately, Tang Zheng and the others left in time. Otherwise, there would definitely be a conflict with them. The city guard did not even look at those who were arrested. He also knew that the imperial family he was looking for was definitely not among them. He only did this to report to his superiors. He hurriedly rushed in the direction of Sky City. His mount rampaged, and his rumbling footsteps resounded through the streets. Everywhere he passed, pedestrians avoided him. After a while, he arrived at a huge building. This building was located directly below Sky City, and the light pillar that connected Sky City to the sky came from here. This building was heavily guarded, and outsiders could not get close at all. Not long after, the light pillar's light increased greatly, and many people went straight to Sky City from the light pillar and disappeared from Sky City. Tang Zheng and the others came not far from this building without anyone noticing and saw this scene from afar. Did they go to Sky City from here? Tang Zheng asked curiously. Flying was forbidden in the imperial city, unless one was a noble or a member of the imperial family. Especially below the imperial family, even the nobles were not allowed to fly. As a result, if the nobles wanted to enter the Sky Castle, they could only rely on this pillar of light. The light pillar was similar to an elevator in the human world, instantly transporting people to Sky City. It was convenient, fast, and easy to manage. The mist explained, "Your guess is correct. This is the only way for people other than the royal family to enter Sky City. Random people can't enter Sky City at all." Tang Zheng frowned. If they couldn't reach Sky City, wouldn't they have to return empty-handed? Should I barge in and force my way into Sky City? In this way, they would be completely exposed. Tang Zheng was not so arrogant as to think that he could dominate the imperial city with just these few people. Xiaobai looked deeply into Tang Zheng's eyes. He understood the worry in his heart and said, "Master, don't worry. I already have a plan." "A plan?" Tang Zheng looked at him in surprise. Xiaobai pointed at his head proudly and said, "The memories I inherited are a precious treasure. Among them is a way to reach Sky City without anyone knowing." Tang Zheng raised his thick eyebrows, overjoyed. "Is that so?" Xiaobai nodded heavily. "Of course." After a pause, he deliberately said mysteriously, "Just follow me." Tang Zheng knew very well that Xiaobai was not one to lie. He must be very confident. So he signaled to the other two and followed Xiaobai's footsteps, bypassing the magnificent building in front of them. The few of them avoided the crowd, walking more and more remote, to the point that there was a gloomy feeling. Wild Dog subconsciously tightened his clothes and asked curiously, "Where are we going? Why do I feel so gloomy, like we come to cemetery?" Unknowingly, Xiao Bai's expression had become very serious and dignified. After listening to Wild Dog's words, he solemnly said, "This is the cemetery of the royal family. Don't talk nonsense and tarnish the ancestors of the royal family." Wild Dog subconsciously withdrew his tongue, looked around, and said bitterly, "I see. I definitely don't mean to disrespect the ancestors of the royal family." Looking at Xiao Bai's expression, Tang Zheng understood Xiao Bai's mood. This was equivalent to the history of the royal family, the place where many of the royal family members were buried. As a descendant of the royal family, Xiao Bai's mood was heavy as one could imagine. The atmosphere suddenly became serious. Suddenly, Xiao Bai's footsteps stopped, his eyes almost spewing fire, staring angrily in front. "What's wrong?" Tang Zheng asked, looking forward. His heart suddenly tightened, and he stared in front of him dumbfounded. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a cold breath. What did they see? They saw many broken tombstones lying in the mud. The handwriting on them had long been covered with mud and could not be recognized at all. This large graveyard was like this, causing people to tremble in fear. For Xiao Bai, this was the fuse that ignited the anger in his heart. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. His feet seemed to be filled with lead, and he walked step by step towards the cemetery. The cemetery has been completely destroyed. Wild Dog was speechless, unable to believe the scene in front of him. Without a doubt, this must be the many crimes that the traitor had committed. Not only did he not let the living royal family go, he did not even let the dead royal family go. He actually destroyed the graves of the royal family. In fact, this was not hard to imagine. In order to consolidate his position, the traitor had to destroy the prestige of the royal family to the greatest extent. Destroying the graves of the royal family was equivalent to destroying the roots of the royal family. This did not require too much effort, and the results were obvious. Naturally, it was his first choice. Moreover, this could also deter others. Even the royal family's cemetery was not bad, so if others wanted to go against him, they would naturally have to weigh their own strength. Xiao Bai lifted a tombstone from the mud and gently wiped the mud off it, his hands trembling. "I will kill the descendants of that traitor and make them pay with blood," Xiao Bai said through gritted teeth, his hands clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his hands. But he did not notice. Tang Zheng held his shoulder and comforted him. "We will definitely take back everything that belongs to the royal family." Xiao Bai put down the tombstone and strode into the depths of the tombstone. The light around him was getting darker and darker, and several people followed his footsteps. Xiao Bai stopped, his mouth muttering an obscure and difficult-to-understand chant. His hands flipped, and one after another he slapped the void. Boom! A door opened with a bang. "This is the transmission formation to Sky City, the secret passage for our royal family to worship our ancestors. Apart from the royal family, no one else will know. It is absolutely safe." To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1524, Teleportation Array. Everyone was overjoyed. With this passage, they would be able to reach Sky City without anyone noticing. They wouldn't have to return empty-handed. The group immediately stepped through the door and arrived at another place in the next second. They were in ruins, but from the ruins, it could be seen that this place used to be very grand and extraordinary. Xiao Bai gnashed his teeth, his eyes almost spitting fire as he said, "This is the royal family's ancestral shrine, but it was destroyed by that traitor. That traitor not only destroyed the royal family's tombs, he didn't even let the ancestral shrine go. He was unscrupulous. They didn't see any other traces of people in the ruins, which made it easy for them to hide their tracks. What entered their eyes was a magnificent group of palaces. It was impossible to imagine what it looked like from the ground. Only when they were in it did they understand how magnificent Sky City was. It was several times larger than the imperial city in the human world. A person in it was like a grain of sand falling into a pile of sand, inconspicuous at all. Xiao Bai had detailed information about Sky City's layout in his memories. However, after so many years, who knew how much had changed? Thus, they didn't dare to be brazen and carefully advanced towards the core of Sky City. Gradually, they saw pairs of patrolling Imperial Guards. These Imperial Guards were all holding magic weapons and riding strange beasts. They were strict and orderly, patrolling Sky City from above. Outside Sky City were the city guards patrolling, and inside Sky City were the Imperial Guards. Both forces couldn't be underestimated. Although Fog had come to the Imperial City several times to gather information, she had never gone up to Sky City. It was simply too dangerous. Moreover, she didn't have a way to silently come up. This time, we must catch that traitor's trusted aide. If we can catch the guy on the throne, that would naturally be the best. Tang Zheng said in a deep voice. After that traitor seized the world, he also openly proclaimed himself king and gave himself the title of Hao Tianwang. His descendant, who was the person on the throne, gave himself the title of King Wuling. All of this was told to them by Fog. King Wuling lived in seclusion, and very few people had seen his true face. It was indeed not an easy task to find King Wuling in this vast complex of buildings. Tang Zheng suddenly had an idea and said, "Maybe it's not that hard. I can catch a guard and use the soul-searching technique on him. Then we'll know all the answers." The soul-searching art was the Devil Clan's art, and Wild Dog was no stranger to it. He was very surprised that Tang Zheng knew the soul-searching art. But the Wild Dog tactfully did not say a word. The Fog did not know about the soul-searching technique. She frowned and looked at him curiously. At this time, a group of patrolling Imperial Guards happened to pass by. Tang Zheng quietly rushed out. The hidden sword lightly slit their throats, and several Imperial Guards immediately lost their lives. Then, he spared the life of one of the Imperial Guards. His big hand grabbed the other's head, and a lot of information flowed into his brain like a tide. His eyes lit up. These Imperial Guards really knew a lot of information. He already knew that the palace where King Wuling lived was still some distance away. Those few mounts wanted to resist, but they were also taken care of by Tang Zheng. He used the sky-swallowing technique to suck them into the black hole, turning them into energy in the heaven realm, with their clothes and armor, and change into their appearance. This way, we can avoid exposing ourselves as much as possible. Tang Zheng advised. The transformation technique was not complicated for them. They all changed into the appearance of the dead Imperial Guards and patrolled the city like they were supposed to. With the expert Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai who were familiar with the road, the two of them worked together, and with the disguise, they easily avoided most of the Imperial Guards. Step by step, they went deep into the heart of Sky City. It's really strange. Although Sky City's security is tight, there are more loopholes to take advantage of in the Imperial City. After walking around, Tang Zheng clicked his tongue in wonder. Fog was not surprised and said, "The number of Imperial Guards is limited. Only the most important people can become Imperial Guards, but the number of city guards is many times more, and the people are mixed together. So, the city guards have enough manpower to control the streets, but the Imperial Guards can't do this. Moreover, I'm afraid that King Wuling would never dream that we could quietly reach Sky City, which caused the situation to be tight on the outside and loose on the inside." Tang Zheng gave bewilderment Fog a deep look as her analysis was clear and logical. She was quite smart. "Hey, why is the security here so much tighter than other places?" Suddenly, they stopped and looked at a nearby palace. They had not reached King Wuling's palace yet. Along the way, there were many palaces, but the guards were mostly the same, and there was nothing too out of the ordinary. But this palace was different. Moreover, this palace was completely black and lacked the magnificence of other palaces, giving people an inexplicable sense of oppression. "What kind of palace is this?" Tang Zheng asked Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai tilted his head and looked at it for a while before shaking his head and saying, "This palace is newly built. In my memory, this palace does not look like this." "A newly built palace?" "The Imperial Guards are so strict, so there must be something unusual about it," Tang Zheng said thoughtfully. Everyone nodded inwardly, thinking that this made sense. They all looked at the palace and saw the words Lunar Temple written on the plaque. Then let's go in first and see if there are any unexpected gains. Tang Jing thought and said. The others looked at each other and did not have any objections. Okay, let's go in. These people look like Imperial guards. They walked into Lunar Temple as usual. However, an angry roar sounded. Stop! Are you all blind? This is Lunar Temple, not other palaces. How can you come and go as you please? A few Imperial guards blocked their way. They looked ferocious as if they were about to kill them. Tang Jing shivered. From this, it seemed that this Lunar Temple was even more unusual than they had imagined. Since this was the case, then they could not give up like this. He did not panic and said calmly, "We are here to help. Recently, the Imperial City has not been peaceful, so we received orders to increase the defense of Lunar Temple." Whose orders? The Imperial Guards were skeptical. His Majesty's orders. Nonsense. How could we not know His Majesty's orders? The other side was enraged, and their expressions immediately changed. Who are you, daring to intrude into Lunar Temple? How audacious. Take them down. With this order, the Imperial Guards swarmed over. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The hidden profound sword flew up, and several sword lights fell around the palace. In an instant, a restriction was quietly activated around the palace. Restriction. Tang Jing hurriedly set up a restriction. Restriction was a type of array that could isolate the outside world for hundreds or thousands of years, just like the restriction on Mount Bujo that had isolated the 100 Faces Star Sovereign from the outside world for tens of thousands of years. However, Tang Jing's restriction was not that strong and could only isolate the outside world for a period of time to buy them more time. They all understood Tang Jing's intention. Since they were already here, they might as well take things as they came. No one retreated. In fact, even the weakest wild dog's face was flushed red, and he became excited. At this moment, the Imperial Guards rushed in front of them. These Imperial Guards were not weak. Most of them were in the Soul Formation realm, similar to the Fog, but far stronger than Wild Dog. However, with Tang Jing and Xiao Bai, two Mayana realm experts, these Imperial Guard were naturally like chickens and dogs. Before the Imperial Guards rushed in front of them, Tang Jing's sword had already slashed their necks. Blood splattered, and their heads were separated from their bodies. Kill. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1525. With a single shout, the killing intent filled the air. Tang Jing was the first to rush out. The hidden sword flashed, and the Imperial Guards fell one by one. Xiao Bai did not want to fall behind. A ball of flame shot out from his hand, turning into fireballs that danced among the Imperial Guards. When the fireballs appeared, the Imperial Guards were stunned. They looked at him in disbelief. The Imperial Guards were a higher level than the city guards. Among the city guards, only the city guards knew about the Imperial family. Even the normal Imperial Guards knew about the Imperial family. From this, it could be seen that the hierarchy of the outer heavens was very strict. Imperial family. The Imperial Guards exclaimed. They were scared out of their wits by Xiao Bai's identity. There were too many legends about the Imperial family. One of them was that the Imperial family was good at controlling fire. They were practically the god of fire. Because of this, ever since the Imperial family disappeared, there were very few people who could control fire. Even if there were people who could control fire, they all gave up on this ability. This was because, whether it was Hao Tianwang or the current King Wuling, they hated the art of controlling fire to an unbelievable extent. Many people who were good at controlling fire were killed by the authorities. This caused no one to dare to use the fire-controlling divine ability openly. No one was even willing to learn it. To use the fire-controlling divine ability openly in the city, in the sky, other than the Imperial family, who else could it be? Xiao Bai heard their exclamations, but was unmoved. He said coldly, "Yes, the Imperial family is back. The end of you traitors is here." Whoosh! A few fireballs enveloped the Imperial Guards. Before they could even let out a scream, they were completely refined by the flames and disappeared into the air. The Fog and Wild Dog witnessed everything. Before they could even do anything, all the Praetorian Guards had fallen. The two of them looked at each other and smacked their lips. They were shocked. They thought that they had to be careful and cautious, but who would have thought that with just a word of disagreement, Tang Zheng and Little White would cooperate so well, killing in all directions. This was so satisfying. For so many years, he had suffered too much. It felt so good to be able to hold his head high. Tang Zheng and Little White stopped at the same time. Looking at the messy battlefield, they looked at each other speechlessly. Wild Dog exclaimed, "It's really wonderful." The mist also nodded. "Your Majesty, you are really amazing. Master is more powerful," Xiaobai said indifferently as his gaze fell on Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng shook his head as his deep eyes stared at the palace in front of him. The palace was pitch black, completely different from the other palaces, and an invisible pressure assaulted his senses. At this moment, he was certain that this palace was definitely not simple. He had to go in and take a look. When we go in later, we must be careful. I have a premonition that there will be danger in the palace. Just now, there are quite a few Imperial guards, more than the other palaces, but the real danger has just begun. Tang Zheng warned in a deep voice. The few of them nodded silently. The atmosphere became solemn and heavy as they walked into the palace together. The front door of the palace was a huge stone door, which was quite different from the wooden door of the other palaces. "I will open the door." Wild Dog did not have time to join the battle and felt that he did not contribute, so he volunteered at this moment. Wild Dog pressed his hands on the stone door and roared loudly. His power was constantly gushing out. Creak! The stone door opened little by little. Wild Dog's cheeks were red and his eyes were rolled out. Together with his appearance, he looked a little ferocious. Finally, he did his job and pushed the stone door open. It was pitch black inside the stone door. Even the sunlight outside could not shine in. Whoosh! Suddenly, a fishy wind blew in their faces. Wild Dog didn't even have time to catch his breath. With a scream, his figure disappeared behind the stone door, dragged into the darkness. "What is that?" The few of them stared with their eyes wide open, but they did not see clearly what it was. There was no movement behind the stone door. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. Wild Dog did not make any sound. No one knew if he had encountered an accident. Tang Zheng clenched his teeth. The Wild Dog had followed him here, and he had not been able to protect his safety. He fell into deep self-reproach. He took a deep breath and temporarily put all the distracting thoughts behind him. Danger is coming. Be careful. Tang Zheng stepped into the stone door step by step. Xiaobai and the fog followed him carefully. A fireball rose from Xiaobai's palm, illuminating the surroundings. However, the surrounding darkness was like a viscous lake. It actually prevented the light from shining too far, restricting the light. Whoosh! The fishy wind came again. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank. With a swoosh, he lit up the hidden mystic sword. Swish! The hidden mystic sword slashed down, creating a large string of sparks in the darkness. Tang Zheng's touch was very strong. He felt that the hidden mystic sword was cut off from something. It was very hard, so it created so many sparks. "It's a big guy." Xiaobai vaguely saw a figure. "Is it a beast?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. "It must be," Xiaobai said without hesitation. Tang Zheng snorted and said, hiding the head but showing the tail, "Then I will force you to show yourself." Swish, swish, swish. A series of sword lights appeared, shooting forward. Finally, they saw a huge silhouette in front of them. A huge head with a horn in the middle of its forehead. Its mouth was filled with fangs, and saliva was dripping from the corner of its mouth. It pounced towards Tang Zheng, but was intercepted by the hidden mystic sword. Swish, swish, swish. Rays of cold light shot out from the horn and tangled with the sword lights. However, the hidden mystic sword was very powerful. It defeated the opponent in a few moves. The hidden mystic sword fiercely chopped down on the horn. Crack! The horn was broken into two sections. Ayo! The bloody mouth let out a shrill cry. It kept shaking. Its lantern-sized eyes were filled with a fierce light. It wanted to eat him alive. Tang Zheng was not satisfied with the result. He raised his hand, and the hidden mystic sword chopped down on its neck. Pooh! The bloody light that shot up to the sky dyed the dark space red. A strong wind blew, like a whirlwind. It was nauseating, "Master, be careful." Suddenly, Xiaobai sucked in a breath of cold air and shouted in shock. The fireball in his hand had already soared into the sky and attacked the darkness. Tang Zheng's eyebrows furrowed as he felt another wave of fishy wind sweep over. "There's more!" Tang Zheng roared. He did not even raise his head. His sword soared into the sky. Pooh! Fresh blood splattered and sprayed towards him. He floated back, avoiding the blood. The fireball also arrived. With a rumbling sound, it exploded in the air and turned into countless little flames. It completely lit up the surroundings. Hiss! They sucked in a breath of cold air, because they clearly saw the scene in front of them. A three-headed monster was in front of them. It looked down on them and stared at them like a tiger eyeing its prey. Only one of its heads had already left its body and fell to the ground. However, the other two heads still gave people a deep shock. Their ferocious gazes made people tremble in fear. To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1526. Two pairs of giant eyes glared fiercely at the group. It bared its fangs and let out a low roar of anger from the depths of its throat. Roar! The two roars sounded at the same time, shaking the roof and causing a cloud of dust to fall down. "This seems to be the mount of that traitor." Miwu suddenly thought of something and said. Tang Zheng was shocked and asked, "How Tianwang?" "Yes, it's his mount, called the three-headed lion." Miwu added, "Humph. Now you can only call it two-headed lion." Xiaobai said disdainfully. Since the other party was the traitor's mount, then it must have committed countless crimes in the past. The traitor was dead, and there was no way to take revenge on him personally. Why not kill this three-headed lion and avenge those who sacrificed themselves in the past? The three-headed lion understood Xiaobai's words and seemed to have been greatly provoked. It roared and shook its head before charging straight at Xiaobai. Xiaobai transformed back into his true form with a shake of his body. His four hooves stepped on the fire wheels as he looked at the other party in high spirits and said, "Today, I'll let you know who's the stronger one." Tang Zheng understood Xiaobai's feelings very well, so he didn't join in the battle. Instead, he retreated a few steps and left the battlefield to Xiaobai and the three-headed lion. The three-headed lion turned pale with fright after seeing Xiaobai's true form. Apparently, it recognized that Xiaobai was a member of the imperial family. The three-headed lion's muscles tensed up. The three-headed lion's body was already very large to begin with. After his body tensed up, the lines of its muscles were very obvious, hidden under its scales. However, in front of Xiaobai, this ferocious beast seemed to be very afraid. This was a fear that came from the depths of its soul and had been there for a long time. Xiaobai didn't pay attention to the other party's fear. The horns on his head burst into flames. With a boom, the red light soared into the sky and landed in front of the three-headed lion. The three-headed lion seemed to have woken up from a dream, and it hurriedly retreated. At the same time, a ray of light rushed out from its remaining two horns, blocking the flames. "Can you stop me?" Xiaobai ignored it. The flames surged to instantly envelop the three-headed viper's entire body. Roar! The three-headed hoe let out a miserable shriek as it kept twisting its body in an attempt to extinguish the flames. However, Xiaobai's flames were different from ordinary flames. They were not easy to extinguish. Therefore, the three-headed viper could only watch as the flames slowly seeped into its skin through the air around its scales. Boom! With an explosion, one of its heads exploded into pieces, turning into balls of flames that fell to the ground. The remaining head saved its life for the time being. It kept retreating and fleeing, leaving behind a trail of flames in the darkness. Chase! Xiaobai was the first to give chase. The fire wheel spun like a beam of light as it quickly chased after him. Boom! 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 The sound of intense fighting could be heard in the darkness. Tang Zheng and the others also caught up. They finally saw Xiaobai and the three-headed lion fighting fiercely. They were fighting with all their might, neither letting the other go. Huh, why is this place so cold? Suddenly, Tang Zheng frowned in surprise. After his reminder, the fog and wild dog finally reacted. They tensed up and felt much colder. They looked around and realized that the walls of the palace were actually covered with a thick layer of ice. No wonder the cold was so strong that even people like them who were immune to both heat and cold could feel it. Look at the ground. The fog suddenly pointed at the ground. The few of them took a closer look and saw that there were cracks on the ground. Streams of cold air were coming out from the cracks and swirling around like bursts of green smoke. It's also ice below. They immediately understood. The outside of the palace looked completely dark. It was definitely hard to imagine that this was a complete ice cave. If a normal person came here, they would have been frozen into popsicles. Even they felt that their blood seemed to be showing signs of freezing. It was obvious how cold it was. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly had a bad premonition and anxiously looked at Little White. In just a short while, the battle had actually changed. Originally, Xiaobai had the upper hand in every aspect, forcing the three-headed lion to retreat step by step. It was very difficult for him to defend, but now there was a drastic change. Xiaobai's flames seemed to have a problem. Its power was greatly reduced, and the three-headed lion had no flames on its body. It was like a fish in water, and its attack power was greatly increased. Whoosh! The three-headed lion fiercely bit at Xiaobai. Its long fangs were extremely terrifying. Its remaining two heads were gone, leaving only two bloody necks. The flames flew out from Xiaobai's body. However, just as the flames were about to touch the three-headed lion, they were inexplicably extinguished in mid-air. Ah! Tang Zheng, who witnessed all of this, couldn't help but cry out in surprise. He was very clear about the power of Xiaobai's flames. They could almost burn everything. This was something that had never happened before, but it happened just like that. It was really inconceivable to the extreme. How could this be? Miwu was also shocked. In her mind, Xiaobai was invincible and invincible. How could he drop the ball like this? Xiaobai was also very puzzled. He could clearly feel that his magic power was being restricted. Regardless of whether it was channeling his power or using his abilities, they were all greatly reduced. Especially after he chased here, this feeling became even more intense. It was as if there was some mysterious power suppressing him. The three-headed lion seemed to be very pleased with itself. A sinister smile appeared on its face as it opened its mouth and bit at Xiaobai. Xiaobai's flames had failed, and the three-headed lion thought that Xiaobai wouldn't be able to resist it. However, it was wrong. A sword light suddenly appeared in front of it. With a puff, it directly cut off two of its fangs. The three-headed lion felt the pain and hurriedly fled. Tang Zheng saved Xiaobai and hurriedly rushed to his side. He asked with concern, "Xiaobai, are you okay?" Xiaobai transformed into a human and looked at Tang Zheng while panting. His expression kept changing as he said, "Master, this palace is very strange." Tang Zheng nodded heavily. He had already sensed that this palace was definitely suppressing Xiaobai. That was why his magic had failed. However, the others were not affected by this restriction. This meant that this suppression was specifically targeted at Xiaobai. Or, to put it more bluntly, it was specifically targeted at the imperial family. The traitors had always been afraid of the imperial family. They were deeply afraid that the imperial family would come back for revenge and take away everything that belonged to them. That was why they built this new palace to suppress the imperial family's abilities. However, this palace was an inanimate object. As long as the imperial family didn't enter, how much could it suppress the imperial family? For a moment, Tang Zheng couldn't figure out what was going on. His gaze fell on the three-headed lion that was hiding far away. Perhaps it could answer this question. Swoosh! Without hesitation, he raised his sword and attacked. Xiaobai was being suppressed, but didn't he still have his mother? Could the three-headed lion turn the tables? To read a novel without mistakes, please visit Chapter 1527. Once the sword was unleashed, there was no turning back. In the blink of an eye, the hidden mystic sword arrived in front of the three-headed hoe. The three-headed hoe knew how powerful the hidden mystic sword was, and it did not want to lose its last head to the hidden mystic sword. Thus, it let out a loud roar and stomped its front foot on the ground. Bang! The ground cracked open, and an ice wall rose from the ground to protect it. Voila! Like the sound of ripping silk, the ice wall was cut into two halves from the middle and collapsed with a loud crash. The sword of hidden mystery's attack did not diminish, ruthlessly chopping down on the head of the three-headed viper. Its horn shone brightly as it attempted to intercept. Gotcha! The light shattered, and the sword of hidden Xian happened to cut the horn in half. The sword of hidden Xian continued downward, drawing a long line of blood on the head of the three-headed venomous snake. The bloodline extended all the way to its lower body. The three-headed viper seemed to have been struck by a body-fixing spell. It stood there motionless, its eyes glazed over, and the aura of death rose up spontaneously, occupying its pupils. Drip, drip, drops of blood seeped out from the bloodlines and landed on the ground. In an instant, the ground was dyed red. The blood followed the cracks and seeped into the ground. Clang! With a loud bang, the three-headed viper's body collapsed to the ground like a small mountain collapsing. It smashed into the ground and splashed everywhere, revealing the layer of ice underneath. Not only were the walls of the palace covered in ice, but even the ground was also covered in ice. It was truly an ice cave. The blood dyed the ice red and seeped into the ice. It was a strange sight. Looking at the corpse of the three-headed venomous snake, the few of them heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. However, Xiao Bai's expression was still extremely solemn because the mysterious power that suppressed him still hadn't disappeared. In fact, it hadn't weakened in the slightest. This meant that killing the three-ho did not solve the problem. He looked at the corpse of the three-headed viper and said in a deep voice, "There must be something else hidden here. Otherwise, the enemy wouldn't have gone to such great lengths to build such a palace in Sky City." The others' expressions turned cold as they nodded in agreement. Xiao Bai's words made sense. But the key point was that there were no other living things in this palace, so what could be suppressing Xiao Bai? Since we found something strange, let's split up and look for it. Tang Zheng was at his wit's end, so he said. The others nodded and started searching in different corners. As time passed, the restriction outside the palace weakened. If he continued to waste time, it was very likely that the enemy would discover his whereabouts, and it would not be easy to find King Wuling again. However, after searching for a long time, he still couldn't find anything. Other than ice, there was nothing else in the palace. Tang Zheng slowly stopped and stared at the layer of ice on the ground. He didn't know how thick that layer of ice was. An idea flashed through his mind, and he said thoughtfully, "Do you think there will be something under the ice?" The walls of the palace were not thick. Only the ice layer on the ground was not too deep. If there was a problem, it could only fall on the ice layer below the ground. This was a method of elimination. After eliminating all other impossible possibilities, there was only one possibility left. The others were startled and stopped one after another. They stared at the ice on the ground and said, "Then are we going to break this ice?" "That's right," Tang Zheng decisively said. "I'll do it." Xiao Bai volunteered. "I want to see what kind of damn thing is hidden below that can actually suppress my strength." Boom! Xiao Bai stomped heavily on the ice. With a loud sound, the ice layer immediately cracked open, and then many thin cracks appeared. Not long after, these cracks actually covered the entire ice layer. The three-headed venomous snake's blood just happened to follow these cracks, quickly spreading deeper. The blood dyed the entire ice layer red, causing the ice layer to release a strange red color. So. Icicles shot out from the ice layer one after another, accurately aiming at the group. "Be careful," Tang Zheng shouted. The hidden profound sword was unstoppable, shattering all the icicles that were shot at him. The other three people were not injured, but they were all shocked. Everyone realized that the problem was indeed under the ice layer. The ice layer is changing again. Suddenly, a cry of surprise sounded out. It was the fog that showed some clues. The ice layer was actually like a small mountain, slowly rising from the ground, as if it was about to form an ice mountain. "I'll deal with him," Tang Zheng roared, and the hidden profound sword ruthlessly slashed at the ice layer. Ice sputtered and a large crack appeared. Everyone's pupils shrank, and they all saw the scene under the crack at the same time. There was actually a figure in the center of the ice layer. There's someone. Tang Zheng was shocked. He never thought that there would be a person under the ice layer. Who was this person? Was he dead or alive? What did it have to do with the mysterious power that suppressed Xiaobai? Questions came one after another, but Tang Zheng was even more confused. So, without any hesitation, he controlled the hidden profound sword and tried to slash at the ice layer again. Who dares to break into the city in the sky? However, a furious roar sounded outside the palace. The few people were shocked. They knew that the restriction was gone. They were discovered by the enemy, and the enemy's main force must be waiting outside. So, a light flew in from the entrance of the palace. It was a shining ice sword. In a flash, it arrived in front of Tang Zheng. He had to use the hidden profound sword to meet the ice sword. Clang! There were no sparks, only the cold air burst out in all directions. At the same time, the light at the entrance of the palace suddenly dimmed. The shadows blocked the entrance, and the exit was blocked. They had just found a clue, and now they were discovered by the enemy. This was really not the right time. Tang Zheng secretly gritted his teeth. He knew that it would not be easy to figure out the mystery under the ice layer. At this critical moment, the most important thing was to save the lives of the few people. Everyone be careful. If we can't beat them, we will retreat. Tang Zheng warned. He did not immediately retreat, which meant that he did not intend to return empty-handed. He was prepared to work harder to get more information. This was not a wasted trip. The ice sword did not gain any advantage. It flew back and fell into the hands of a person. This person was tall and strong. He was very powerful. At first glance, it was obvious that he was a person of high status. Tang Zheng was not in the mood to look. More of his attention was attracted to the figure in the ice layer. He was not willing to give up. Taking advantage of this gap, he finally used the hidden, profound sword again. He did not care about the threat of the person who came and slashed at the ice layer. How dare you? The person who came was livid. He was furious to the extreme. He roared, his voice like thunder. Whoosh! The ice sword flew out of his hand and stabbed at Tang Zheng's back. Don't hurt the master! Xiaobai was in a difficult position. Since this damned place suppressed his magic, and he could not use his flames normally, he had to use a new magic weapon. The bloodthirsty scepter flew up, and a bloody light burst out. The blood on the ground quickly flew towards the bloodthirsty scepter and wrapped around it. Suddenly, the bloodthirsty scepter seemed to have grown many times, and it stood in front of the ice sword. Boom! Chapter 1528. Lushan's True Face. Everyone looked over at the same time, and they were all shocked. This face was actually somewhat similar to the person who had just arrived, and it was obvious that they were related by blood. How Tianhua? Miwu immediately recognized the other party, and she screamed in shock. The Grand Elder had told them too many times about how Tianhuang's appearance, so Miwu was very familiar with it, and she would never forget it even in death. Although this was the first time she had seen a real person, she recognized him at a glance. It was obvious that this person was King Wulin. Seeing this scene, King Wulin flew into a rage. How dare you? The ice sword shone brightly, and in an instant, the ice in the palace seemed to be summoned. Ka, ka, ka. The pieces of ice seemed to come alive, flying into the sky and aiming at the few people. Xiaobai pointed his finger, and the bloodthirsty scepter had already absorbed all the blood on the ground, and a blood-red light shrouded the surroundings. With a roar from Xiaobai, the bloodthirsty scepter underwent an earth-shattering change. The blood completely emerged from the tip of the scepter and turned into thousands of threads, like vines, quickly spreading towards King Wulin. Kill! A roar filled with killing intent burst out from King Wulin's mouth. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of air being torn apart rang out, and the air was filled with cold air, and the wild dog couldn't help but shiver. Previously, he had been captured by the three-headed venomous snake and had fallen into darkness. If it wasn't for Tang Zheng chasing after him in time, he would probably have lost his life. Thus, seeing this scene, the wild dog trembled. Although he knew that he was no match for the enemy, he still took out his transcendent treasure and prepared to fight to the death with the enemy. Miwu shook her 10 fingers, and a cloud of fog spread out from her fingertips, causing the palace to be shrouded in fog. Wherever the ice passed, the fog was frozen and solidified into ice crystals. Thousands of threads of blood also tore through the fog and clashed with the ice. Pung, pung, pung. A series of loud sounds rang out. That was the sound of the ice colliding with the blood threads, exploding into pieces. However, the blood threads couldn't hold on for long either. Almost at the same time, the blood threads and ice were exhausted. The ice sword and the bloodthirsty scepter clashed, and 2 different lights burst out from the point of contact. Boom! One was white and one was red. The radiance was so bright that it dyed the palace and the fog into a different color. Xiao Bai gritted his teeth. He finally realized how powerful King Wuling was. They had only just clashed, but he already knew that King Wuling was stronger than him. However, his bloodthirsty scepter was stronger than the ice sword. That was why they were in such a stalemate. Xiao Bai had blocked King Wuling's attack almost single-handedly. King Wuling looked at Xiao Bai in shock and asked, "What kind of magical weapon is this?" Xiao Bai coldly snorted and said, "I will take back everything that you took from my ancestor." Whoosh! The bloodthirsty scepter's radiance actually overshadowed the ice sword. King Wuling was dumbfounded. He looked at Xiao Bai in despair and said, "You're a member of the imperial family?" Xiao Bai was in human form, so King Wuling didn't recognize him immediately. King Wuling had been influenced by the imperial family since he was young. He had always felt a deep sense of apprehension toward them, but unfortunately, he had never truly fought them. However, the imperial family was like a nail that had been buried in his heart long ago. He was so shocked now that he had finally met a member of the imperial family. This emotion didn't last long, and he quickly calmed down. What was so great about the imperial family? Didn't they still lose to his father, Hao Tianwang? Even the remnants of the imperial family were wiped out when they fought with all their might. Therefore, he shouldn't be afraid of the imperial family. The imperial family wasn't as invincible as the legend said. History had already proven that his father had won once, so he would win a second time. Moreover, this time, he would kill them all to prevent future troubles. He would make sure that the last remnants of the imperial family would disappear from the sky beyond heaven. No, they would disappear from this world, never to return. He had this strong confidence. In an instant, his aura skyrocketed. The ice sword became incomparably sharp, as if it was unstoppable. It cut through the bloodthirsty scepter's blood-red light and drove straight in, forcing the scepter to retreat again and again. At the same time, the Forbidden Army swarmed in, completely blocking the entrance to the palace. With a few whooshing sounds, the Forbidden Army rushed in front of the fog and Wild Dog. They couldn't interfere with the battle between Xiao Bai and King Wuling. Moreover, the Forbidden Army knew that King Wuling hated it when people interrupted him when he was fighting. No Forbidden Army dared to provoke him. Therefore, their targets became the Fog, Wild Dog, and Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng seemed to have lost his soul. He stared at Hao Tianwang without moving. His eyes were like lightning, unwilling to move away for even a second. Wild Dog and the Fog didn't know what he was thinking, but they knew that they couldn't let the Forbidden Army disturb him. Therefore, they took up the task of defending the enemy. With a sway of his body, he disappeared into the fog, blending into the rest of the fog. The Forbidden Army soldier at the front had blood spurting out from his neck. His head was separated from his body, and his neck flew backward. The other Forbidden Army soldiers didn't retreat. Instead, they continued to attack without hesitation. Puff! Puff! Blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the palace red. This was the specialty of the Fog's attack. Although the Fog's cultivation wasn't higher than the Forbidden Army's, its attacks were everywhere, making it impossible for the enemy to escape. Wild Dog was much inferior. Although his courage was commendable and his giant hammer was impenetrable and majestic, his cultivation was far inferior to the Forbidden Army's. He was knocked down to the ground after a few moves. Fortunately, he had rich combat experience and had been at the brink of death many times. Therefore, he narrowly escaped from the Forbidden Army's magic weapon several times. Tang Zheng seemed to be uninvolved. Suddenly, he didn't see the fierce fighting around him. His attention was completely attracted by Hao Tianwang. He wasn't stupid. He just found something strange about Hao Tianwang. Hao Tianwang should be dead. However, Hao Tianwang in the eyes had a ruddy complexion. He was no different from a living person. Although his eyes were closed and he didn't have any aura, Tang Zheng was restless. Especially the tomes of arcane, it was restless. The heavenly book cultivated the heavenly path, so was very sensitive to the outside world. It was almost never like the current situation where it was ready to make a move. The only explanation was that the heavenly book had sensed something unusual. It was very likely that it was a huge threat. The heavenly book and Tang Zheng had already merged into one. His body and the heavenly book were one. The heavenly book had sensed a threat, so it was warning Tang Zheng. He should have left the palace immediately, but he didn't turn around. He wanted to figure out the situation. Why is the heavenly book so afraid of a dead person? There must be a reason that can be explained. His eyes burned as he stared unblinkingly at Hao Tianwang. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. An unimaginable thought popped up in his mind, causing him to open his mouth wide in shock. Unless, to read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1529. Unless he's not dead. When he blurted out these words, he seemed to be shocked as well. He couldn't be any more shocked. Although he wanted to deny this thought, it was as if it was magical. It quickly took root in his mind, and he couldn't refute it at all. He took a deep breath and suppressed the fear in his heart. He stared at Hao Tianwang with burning eyes. Gradually, the hidden mystic sword lit up, and his eyes became resolute. Whether you're dead or alive, I'll make you disappear from this world once and for all. He spat out a mouthful of turbid air, and under the blazing sword light, he disappeared. One with the sword. This ice clearly had an extremely strong defensive power, which was why he couldn't really attack Hao Tianwang's body. Therefore, he chose to use his most powerful move, one with the sword. Whoosh! The hidden mystic sword flew towards Hao Tianwang. The others also noticed the situation and exclaimed, especially King Wuling. He was so shocked that his eyeballs almost fell out. No! King Wuling had already sensed the power of this sword, so he couldn't help but worry. Seeing King Wuling's reaction, Xiaobai was puzzled. He didn't know why Tang Zheng was so determined to attack a corpse, and why King Wuling's reaction was so big. Xiaobai didn't understand, but that didn't stop him from trusting Tang Zheng unconditionally. Therefore, he didn't care about his safety and activated the Bloodthirst Scepter. This place only suppressed his fire-related divine ability, but it didn't stop him from activating the Bloodthirst Scepter. The Bloodthirst Scepter's light soared into the sky again, and all the blood of the dead Imperial Guards flew towards it and gathered on the Bloodthirst Scepter. Suddenly, bang, 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 a series of shocking explosions rang out. Streaks of blood shot out from the Bloodthirst Scepter and hit a few Imperial Guards. They immediately exploded on the spot, and the blood quickly replenished the Bloodthirst Scepter. This scene shocked countless people. The might of the bloodthirsty scepter was too inconceivable. The Imperial Guards were not weaklings, and yet they exploded so easily. They even became nutrients for the bloodthirsty scepter. Xiaobai didn't expect the bloodthirsty scepter to be so powerful. He could clearly feel the surging power within the scepter, as if it could destroy the heavens and earth. Ha ha ha! I'll give you a taste of it. Xiaobai gripped the bloodthirst scepter tightly. It was as if he and the scepter were connected by flesh and blood. Streams of blood flowed from his arm into the bloodthirst scepter. Several lines of blood appeared on the surface of the bloodthirst scepter. It was as if the scepter had come to life. The blood veins on the bloodthirst scepter swelled like thousands of ancient tree roots. They danced madly towards the ice sword. Poof, poof, poof. The ice sword cut off the blood veins one after another. However, the blood in the surroundings continued to replenish the bloodthirst scepter. The blood veins were cut off and regenerated. Finally, the ice sword stopped. It was wrapped up by the blood veins like a huge rice dumpling. It stopped in midair, motionless. Xiao Bai's forehead was covered in sweat. The pressure he was under was unimaginable. Even though the situation seemed to be settled, it was still not right. The ice sword was still cutting off the blood veins, and the blood veins were regenerating. Only then did the ice sword stop. If the situation was out of balance, the scales of victory would be tilted. Boom! A deafening sound rang out, and a shock wave shot up to the sky. With a loud bang, a huge hole appeared on the roof of the palace. Debris flew everywhere, along with pieces of ice. At the same time, the walls of the palace collapsed softly as if they were made of tofu. Debris flew everywhere, and smoke and dust rose everywhere. The palace was gone, and only a cloud of dust was left. Coupled with the fog, it was impossible to see the situation clearly. The imperial guards outside the palace were so frightened that they all retreated. Some of them were even hit by the rocks and suffered serious injuries. A palace was gone in the blink of an eye, turning into ruins. The imperial guards outside did not know what had happened, but everyone knew that this palace was extraordinary. It was a forbidden area in Sky City. Other than King Wuling and the imperial guards on duty, no one else was allowed to enter. But now it was destroyed. The waves that were stirred up in their hearts were indescribable. As a result, the imperial guards stared at the ruins in shock. For a moment, no one rushed in to save them. In the ruins, no one could see each other. The lucky survivors who had escaped by chance felt their hearts beat faster. Bang! 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 It was as if their hearts were about to jump out of their throats. The bloodthirsty scepter and the ice sword also returned to their master's hands. The light was completely gone, and their eyes wanted to see each other through the dust. The fog had also returned to its original form and stood beside Xiao Bai. Wild Dog was lying on the ground in a sorry state. It did not have time to stand up. Its eyes darted around, trying to figure out the current situation. Everything was terrifyingly quiet. The imperial guards also surrounded King Wuling. They looked at each other and did not dare to act rashly. King Wuling's breathing was rapid. He was even more nervous than the imperial guards. He had seen the scene where the hidden sword hit Hao Tianwang. All of this was caused by that hit. He knew how serious it was. That was why he was so nervous and worried. Nothing must happen. Nothing must happen. King Wuling prayed silently in his heart. Whoosh! A gust of cold wind blew from the center of the ruins. It was very strange to see a wind blowing from a flat surface. Wherever the cold wind passed, there was not a single person who did not shiver. This cold wind was too strange. It even made these experts feel cold. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sound broke through the air. A human figure flew out of the ruins and landed right beside Xiao Bai. Master! Seeing his face, Xiao Bai could not wait to shout. The fog and Wild Dog were also nervous. They looked at him worriedly. They did not know whether he was in a good or bad situation after that hit. They did not know what the result of that hit was. Tang Zheng was not in a sorry state, but his face was extremely serious. It was like a black cloud was gathering around him. It made people's hearts sink. Tang Zheng opened his mouth. He took a deep breath and said with difficulty, "Go, go, go." These two simple words stunned everyone. Wasn't the outcome of the battle still undecided? Why did he say go? Did something unexpected happen? They all looked at the center of the ruins. They could not see the situation clearly. But the more they could not see, the more uncertain they felt. But they all knew that something serious must have happened to make Tang Zheng look like he was facing a great enemy. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1530. Only Tang Zheng himself knew what had happened to him and why he asked everyone to leave quickly, but he had no time to explain. Seeing everyone confused and at a loss, he was extremely anxious and shouted, "Don't just stand there, go retreat." Only then did they wake up from a dream, especially Xiao Bai. He knew Tang Zheng's style of doing things very well. He would never have such a big reaction unless it was really a critical moment. "Let's go." Xiao Bai rushed out without hesitation. Wild Dog and the Fog also followed his footsteps, and a few of them rushed out of the ruins together. Fortunately, their reaction was very timely, greatly beyond King Wuling's expectations. When they rushed to the edge of the ruins, King Wuling saw the few of them escaping through the gradually disappearing fog. King Wuling's reaction was also very fast, and he shouted decisively, "Stop them!" The Imperial guards on the periphery reacted, and a sky full of magic weapons greeted the few of them. "Somersault Cloud!" Tang Zheng shouted, and the somersault cloud flew out, directly carrying the few of them, and flew straight into the sky. All the attacks of the magic weapons were completely ineffective. King Wuling wanted to chase after them, but he was more worried about another thing. So he was furious and roared to the sky, "Catch them and bring them back." Then, in a flash, he rushed to the center of the ruins. The Imperial guards received the order and chased after the somersault cloud crazily. On the somersault cloud, the few of them looked down. The sky city had become much smaller, and the figures on it had become like ants. But the Imperial guards were so dense that they covered the sky and the sun, and could not completely shake them off. "Master, what's going on?" Xiao Bai finally had the chance to ask. Tang Zheng calmed down, took a deep breath, and said, "How Tian Wang is alive." "How Tian Wang is alive?" The others turned pale with fright and exclaimed. This was especially true for Little White, whose eyes were wide open. "No," Tang Zheng said again, interrupting their thoughts. "He didn't come back to life. He didn't die at all. He was just sealed. It was just like the Scarlet Lunar Beast. It had sealed itself, and what sealed him was a layer of ice. This palace was especially built to seal him." Tang Zheng talked nonstop, but every word was earth-shattering, shocking everyone. If Heavenly King Hao was sealed, then who sealed him? Is it himself, or is it King Wuling? Many thoughts appeared in the minds of the others, and it was difficult for them to find an answer in such a short time. The anger in Xiao Bai's eyes gradually condensed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Since Hao Tian Wang isn't dead, I'll go find him for revenge." Xiao Bai was about to jump down, but he was stopped by Tang Zheng. "Xiao Bai, don't be rash." "Master, I can't help but be rash. Hao Tian Wang is my clan's enemy. If I don't kill him, how can those who died rest in peace?" Xiao Bai said with grief. Tang Zheng understood Xiao Bai's feelings, but he still held on to Xiao Bai tightly. He did not want him to pay a heavy price for being rash. "Xiao Bai, listen to me. Hao Tian Wang is not that simple. I have already fought with him once in the ruins. I can't describe what kind of power he has, but I know that even if we work together, we are definitely not his match." Tang Zheng said solemnly. Although he was unwilling to admit this, it was the truth. He had no choice but to admit it. Xiao Bai was stunned. He was very clear about his master's strength. Moreover, his master was stronger than him. If even he did not have the confidence, then he would not be able to kill Hao Tian Wang. After a while, Xiao Bai asked in disbelief, "Is he really that powerful?" Tang Zheng could not help but recall what had happened earlier. Man and sword as one, striking the thick ice. The ice cracked, and Hao Tian Wang revealed his true body. A majestic and terrifying power surged out, causing Tang Zheng to tremble. Originally, there was no such aura before, but as soon as the ice disappeared, such a strange change occurred. How could not be shocking? Tang Zheng's reaction was very fast. Before the dust had settled, he made a prompt decision and once again used man and sword as one. The distance between the two sides was very short. Lightning flashed. With a loud rumble, the palace completely collapsed. The gap between the two attacks was so short that no one could tell that they were two consecutive attacks. Not only did the place where Hao Tian Wang was standing collapse, but the ground also caved in rapidly, turning into a huge crater. However, Hao Tian Wang remained unmoved. Although there was no ground beneath his feet, he was still standing in the air. He raised his eyes and glanced at Tang Zheng. This seemingly calm glance caused all the attacks to vanish without harming Hao Tian Wang in the slightest. Meanwhile, a sparkling and translucent light appeared on his body, just like the light emitted by ice. Tang Zheng met that pair of eyes. With just a glance, he felt as if he had fallen into a boundless sea of corpses and blood. One had to know that Tang Zheng did not have any inner demons, but the other party's glance contained such power. This was truly terrifying. However, the more terrifying thing was yet to come. A small ice crystal appeared at the tip of Hao Tianwang's finger, and with a so sound, it flew towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng anxiously held his sword horizontally to block the attack. When the ice crystal met the hidden profound sword, it shattered into pieces, but the fragments were like meteorites, fiercely striking Tang Zheng's chest. His body immediately became like a bow that had been pulled into the shape of a full moon. The power he had to endure was unimaginable. A layer of metallic luster lit up on the surface of his body, resisting the power of the ice crystal with great difficulty. However, he was still like a cannonball, flying out from the center of the ruins and coincidentally landing beside Xiao Bai and the others. He did not hear how Tianwang muttered to himself after seeing the golden light on his body. Chaotic Vajra spell. How Tianwang actually knew about the chaotic Vajra spell. If Tang Zheng heard these words, he would definitely have more thoughts about this cultivation technique. Hearing Tang Zheng's narration, the other three were so shocked that their jaws almost fell to the ground. The mist said in shock, How Tianwang seems to be much more powerful than before. Back then, How Tianwang was already at the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm, which was already one of the top cultivators in the sky beyond heaven. He was on par with the ancestor back then, and was only slightly weaker than the late emperor. Now it seemed that Heavenly King Hao's cultivation had reached the peak, the 9th level of the Mahayana realm. He had even surpassed this level and reached an even more mysterious level. Tang Zheng's head moved. When he was in the Suicide Valley, Tang Zheng had learned about it from the ancestor. The cultivation levels of the sky beyond heaven were the same as those of the mortal world. Back then, the ancestor and Hao Tianwang were both at the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm, while the late emperor was at the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm. During the chaos back then, although the ancestor had managed to preserve his life, he had also suffered heavy injuries. As a result, he had fallen ill and his cultivation had plummeted, making it difficult for him to reach his former peak state. Hao Tianwang was obviously luckier than the ancestor. Not only had he seized the world, his cultivation had also increased greatly. Chapter 1531. Little White's face was gloomy. After hearing Mi Wu's words, his heart seemed to sink into a bottomless abyss. He stubbornly said, So what if his cultivation has increased? I will still kill him and avenge my clan. Xiao Bai lost his mind, but Tang Zheng could not. Otherwise, they would all be wiped out. He wouldn't do such a thing to hurt his loved ones and delight his enemies. Xiao Bai, this day will eventually come, but the enemy is too strong. We have to think of another way. Tang Zheng earnestly advised. Xiao Bai felt sullen. He looked at Tang Zheng unwillingly. In the end, he had no choice but to lower his head. This was reality. If he wanted revenge, he had to swallow this anger. Kill! A burst of battle cries came from below. The Imperial Guard had actually caught up. Although many of them were left behind, there were still some outstanding ones who caught up. Little White's anger had nowhere to be vented. Looking at the Imperial Guards rushing over like a tidal wave, it found an outlet to vent its anger. I can't kill that traitor for now. Then, I'll kill you traitors' lackeys first. Xiao Bai left the palace. Without the mysterious power suppressing him, his battle power had increased greatly. Furthermore, he had the bloodthirsty scepter. Suddenly, balls of flames flew out from the somersault cloud. They filled the sky and landed on the Imperial Guards. The flames were like rain falling from the sky. They were densely packed and covered the sky, dyeing the entire sky red. The Imperial Guards who were not strong enough were immediately hit by the flames. They burned fiercely and fell from the sky. They were like meteorites falling from the sky. It was a magnificent sight. The Imperial Guards who were lucky enough to avoid the flames still had lingering fear. However, they did not retreat and rushed to the bottom of the somersault cloud. Dying, Xiao Bai roared. The bloodthirsty scepter shone brightly and turned into thousands of blood threads that fell from the sky. Puff, puff, puff. The blood threads pierced through the chests of the Imperial Guards and instantly absorbed all of their blood. The bloodthirsty scepter seemed to have been nourished by the blood, and it shone even brighter and more powerful. Instantly, even more Imperial Guards were killed by the bloodthirsty scepter. In the Imperial City, everyone walked onto the streets. They raised their heads and looked at the tragic scene in the sky in horror. The Imperial City had been peaceful for countless years. Most people thought that the Imperial City would always be peaceful, and that it would be difficult to cause any more waves. At the very least, this scene would not have happened. But they were completely wrong. This scene was happening right in front of their eyes. It was like a dream, but it was reality. Bloodthirsty scepter. Suddenly, a surprised roar sounded in Sky City. A figure flew up from the ruins and slowly rose into the air. He didn't seem to be moving very fast, but he passed by the Imperial Guard one after another. As for those wailing Imperial Guards, he didn't even look at them. It was as if he didn't care about their lives at all. Whoosh! The flames flew past him, but they instantly froze and turned into a large block of ice. The flames seemed to be still burning, but they were separated by a layer of ice. This scene was very strange. Hao Tianwang. Xiaobai saw the person clearly. It was actually Hao Tianwang. His eyes immediately turned red, as if they were about to spit out flames. Boom! His whole body ignited in flames, and he quickly recovered his true form. His huge body looked down at Hao Tianwang, and his monstrous aura was like rolling flames that pounced towards Hao Tianwang. This aura disappeared in front of Hao Tianwang, as if it had never appeared. The distance between the two sides was quickly shortened. Hao Tianwang's gaze fell on Xiao Bai, and a strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. He said calmly, "So it's a remnant of the past. It's a pity that you didn't hide properly and came to Sky City to seek your own death. You traitor, I'm going to kill you." Xiao Bai roared in anger. Hao Tianwang was unmoved and said with disdain, "Compared to your father, you're too weak. You're as violent as a child, and you can't even withstand a single blow." As soon as his voice fell, Hao Tianwang's gaze fell on the bloodthirsty scepter. He was unwilling to look away, and a look of realization appeared on his face. Back then, I lied to him about a divine weapon. I never thought that the legendary divine weapon would actually exist. The bloodthirsty scepter, the legendary divine weapon, the symbol of power. Just where did you find it? Don't even think about knowing the answer. Do you think a traitor like you can have the bloodthirsty scepter? Xiao Bai angrily rebuked. Hao Tianwang coldly smiled and said, "Right now, I am the person with the most power in sky beyond heaven. The bloodthirsty scepter should naturally be mine. Didn't you steal your power from the imperial family? And you used underhanded methods to do so. Haha, the winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. As for the process, is it important?" Hao Tianwang retorted. "Of course it's important. It's not important," Hao Tianwang retorted. "No matter where you found the bloodthirsty scepter, since it has already appeared in front of me, then don't even think about taking it away. Moreover, you can't take it away. Today, we'll settle our grudges from back then, and let the imperial family completely disappear from this world." As soon as Hao Tianwang's voice fell, a mysterious energy spread out, and the sky seemed to freeze, and the air seemed to solidify. Xiao Bai had been waiting for a chance to face off against Hao Tianwang, so how could he let go of such a good opportunity? Thus, he desperately circulated all of the energy in his body, wanting to use a big move to deal with Hao Tianwang. What's going on? Suddenly, he cried out in alarm as he discovered that his energy was not flowing smoothly at all. That mysterious energy was suppressing him again. His pupils shrank as he stared at Hao Tianwang in disbelief. "It's you." The answer had already been revealed. Previously in the palace, it was Hao Tianwang's mysterious energy that suppressed Xiao Bai's energy. At this moment, Hao Tianwang used the same trick again, and Xiao Bai could not even use an effective attack. Hao Tianwang proudly looked at him and said, "Do you understand now? What did you do?" Xiaobai asked in bewilderment. Tang Zheng and the others could not hide their shock. Just what did Hao Tianwang do to be able to suppress Xiaobai's energy? Hao Tianwang casually said, I already expected that the remnants of the imperial family would not be reconciled and would make a comeback. Thus, after being in closed-door cultivation for so many years, I finally created a divine ability to deal with your imperial family. This way, my descendants and I will always be in an invincible position. Humph! The imperial family still wants to make a comeback, but that's just sending themselves to death. Ha ha ha! Hao Tianwang's laughter echoed in the air, but Xiao Bai's heart slowly sank until it sank into a bottomless abyss. Tang Zheng's heart also suddenly sank. Hao Tianwang did not die, but deliberately faked his death. In reality, he was in closed-door cultivation, deliberately creating a divine ability that could suppress the imperial family. No, this was no longer a simple suppression, but a complete suppression. Chapter 1532. Hao Tianwang's words were equivalent to a death sentence for the imperial family, so it was easy to imagine how Xiaobai felt. He angrily roared, his voice echoing in the sky, filling every corner of Sky City and the imperial city. The angrier Xiaobai was, the happier Hao Tianwang was. This was the effect he wanted. He coldly looked at Xiaobai and said, So go die. That mysterious power arrived in front of Xiaobai, and in the next second, it seemed like it would pierce through his body. Stop! An angry roar rang out. At this critical moment, Tang Zheng finally made his move. Previously, he had been accumulating his strength, and, at the same time, he wanted to obtain more information from Hao Tianwang. Heaven and earth merge. A thunderous roar burst out from his mouth, like a series of claps of thunder, layer upon layer, continuously descending from the sky. Shwa shwa. One sword pointed to the sky, the other to the earth. Two sword lights pierced into the sky, and in an instant a change occurred. Half of a yin and yang fish appeared in the sky, the yang fish, while the other half rose from the ground, the yin fish. One black and 100. The two yin and yang fishes quickly merged, as if heaven and earth were also merging. A world-destroying pressure fell on Hao Tianwang's body. His expression suddenly changed, and he cried out in alarm. What's going on? With his cultivation and strength, he still felt threatened, which showed how terrifying this attack was. He saw through Tang Zheng's cultivation, so he was very surprised that the other side could burst out with such a powerful force. You killed my three-headed centipede mount, and you still want to fight me? Death is not to be regretted. The surging mysterious power split into two, one attacking Xiaobai, the other attacking Tang Zheng. Although it was split into two, its killing power was still very strong. Even with White Yi's strength, it was still suppressed by the mysterious power of its sworn enemy. It couldn't move at all. Heaven and earth merged, and yin and yang merged. The yang fish and yin fish merged into one, and the mysterious power was completely suppressed within the yin and yang fish. A wave of energy rushed between the yin and yang fish. Roar! Xiaobai roared, and the bloodthirsty scepter shone brightly. The bloody lines that were dancing in the air all flew back, forming a dome that enveloped Xiaobai. Suddenly, he felt his whole body relax, and the influence of that mysterious power seemed to have been weakened. His eyes were as bright as the stars, and he was overjoyed. He knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that he couldn't miss. Therefore, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood flew directly onto the bloodthirsty scepter, and the bloody light became even brighter, dyeing half the sky red. Boom! With two loud booms, the yin-yang fish and the dome exploded together. The shockwave formed a huge black hole in the sky. The sky seemed to have collapsed. Part of the shockwave went up while the other part went down. Other than Hao Tianwang, who was not affected, the rest of the imperial guards fell from the sky like meteorites. Half of the palaces in the Sky City were destroyed as if they were rotten wood. Mournful screams rang out one after another. The Sky City was on the verge of collapse, as if it was going to fall from the sky. The light pillar that connected the Sky City and the Imperial City was also wavering, and it was in imminent danger. The Summersol Cloud also suffered a huge impact. Originally, the Summersol Cloud could offset most of the power and not be affected too much. However, at the critical moment, Tang Zheng didn't let the Summersol Cloud do that. Instead, he let the Summersalt Cloud borrow the power of the shockwave and directly rush into the collapsed sky. The scene in front of them disappeared, and they fell into darkness. They couldn't even see their fingers if they stretched out their hands. The surroundings were dead silent, and there wasn't even a sound. Everyone was dumbfounded, but they couldn't see anything. Tang Zheng and Little White had not calmed down the waves in their hearts, and cried out in alarm at the same time. Space door. The impact of that attack was too strong. It greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. It actually tore through space and created a spatial door. As this was a spatial door created by the shockwave, it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. If Tang Zheng hadn't let the Summersol Cloud take advantage of the situation and used the power of the shockwave to fly into the sky, he wouldn't have accidentally entered the spatial door. How Tianwang watched as the Summersol Cloud and the few people disappeared into the pitch-black, collapsed sky. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and realized that things were beyond his imagination. He turned pale with fright and cried out, "Spatial door." Only then did he realize that his opponents had completely disappeared into the spatial door. It wouldn't be that easy to chase after them. He also had a lingering fear. The attack just now was too strong, so it tore through the spatial door. He wanted to chase after them, but it was already too late. How Tianwang's eyes flickered as he stared blankly at the sky. In fact, he was already thinking quickly. With the strength of those guys, it's impossible for them to open the spatial door. Therefore, they will only be lost in the turbulence of time and space and exhaust their lives. They won't be able to threaten me anymore. How Tianwang was no stranger to the spatial door. Back then, he had personally opened the spatial door and sent Xian Yin and the others away. However, he didn't have much understanding of the spatial laws at that time. Today, his cultivation was almost at the Great Circle, so he had a deep understanding of the spatial laws. He didn't believe that those two fellows could freely open a space door with just their cultivation. How Tianwang's strength was already so strong, so he could naturally open the spatial door. However, he had to bring many people through the spatial door, so he couldn't do that. This was because the spatial door couldn't be maintained for too long. Why didn't he chase after them? This was because even if he chased after them and opened the spatial door at the same place, he wouldn't be able to enter and catch them. A person couldn't step into the same river at two different times. By the same principle, the world behind the spatial door was flowing. A person couldn't step into the same place at different times to find them. Therefore, he didn't chase after them in a panic. That would cause his men's morale to be greatly disrupted. The disappearance of their commander was a great taboo. As a person who had been on the battlefield for countless years, how could he not understand this principle? However, he was rather dissatisfied that he didn't personally kill Xiao Bai, a surviving member of the imperial family. As for Tang Zheng, he was also rather shocked and even fearful. With such a cultivation, he could unleash such a terrifying attack. In the future, he would definitely become even more powerful. In that case, he would have another very powerful opponent. This was something that he absolutely couldn't allow to happen. "Father!" King Wuling flew over. After witnessing the scene just now, his heart was beating wildly and he was extremely excited. He was a little scared. Fortunately, his father had come out of seclusion. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he might not have been able to gain an advantage in this battle. "Father, they're seeking their own deaths. They escaped into the spatial door. We don't have to do anything. They're dead for sure." King Wuling was resolute and decisive as he spoke with a murderous aura. How Tianwang was deep in thought, but he really couldn't think of any way to refute. According to his judgment, that group of people definitely couldn't leave the spatial door. Chapter 1533. How Tianwang remained silent. King Wuling asked anxiously, "Father, do you have any other concerns?" One of the reasons I went into seclusion was to attract the imperial family's remnants to attack us, so that we could catch them all in one fell swoop. But now, it seems that the imperial family's remnants were not caught in one fell swoop. They must be hiding somewhere and only came out now. Hao Tianwang's low voice was filled with anger. King Wuling was shocked. This meant that he did not do his job well and left a trail behind. He could not help but have an ugly expression as he said, "I think that the imperial family's remnants came from another world. After all, they escaped when the pregnant empress opened the spatial door. Apart from that, they must have other reinforcements in the realm beyond heaven." Hao Tianwang said firmly. He was more experienced and saw the flaw. "Why do you say that, father?" King Wuling was puzzled. The divine ability that the woman used was clearly used by one of the imperial family's trusted aides. That woman must be one of their descendants. The only one who escaped from the spatial door was the empress and no one else. Since they came together this time, it means that they have connected. There must be a hidden hideout in the realm beyond heaven. King Wuling's eyes turned as if he had been enlightened. He said with a sudden realization, "Father's words make sense. I will immediately send people to track down this group of remnants. Remember one thing, Heavenly King Hao said, you didn't find them before, so that means they must be hiding in a very secluded or unexpected place. We've almost turned the entire outer sky upside down. This time, we'll focus on finding places we haven't been to before. Understood?" King Wuling nodded heavily to show that he understood. Originally, King Wuling was the king of the realm beyond heaven. However, after Hao Tianwang came out of seclusion, his status naturally dropped by a level. There were many things that he had to do personally. Beyond heaven was a world where the strong preyed on the weak. In front of Hao Tianwang, King Wuling quickly changed his role and did not dare to complain at all. As for the grudge in his heart, no one cared. Hao Tianwang didn't care either because everything King Wuling had was given to him by him. If King Wuling dared to complain, he would lose everything. King Wuling suppressed the various emotions in his heart. He also had many considerations. His cultivation had yet to reach the great circle of perfection, and he had yet to truly cultivate a divine ability that could suppress the royal family. This was what King Wuling coveted the most. All of this fell on Hao Tianwang. If he didn't serve Hao Tianwang well, all of this would just be a dream. In the space door, on the Summersall Cloud, Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai could remain calm. However, when they recalled the previous battle, they still had lingering fears. Fog and Wild Dog were pale. The two of them still didn't understand what was going on. Where were they? They looked left and right, but it was pitch black. They couldn't see anything. The Summersall Cloud had already stopped. The surroundings were quiet, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Where are we?" Wild Dog asked, trembling. Fog also asked, "Your Majesty, will Hao Tianwang catch up?" It's impossible for him to catch up even if he wants to." Xiao Bai knew the law of space. He knew that it would be futile for Hao Tianwang to chase into the space door, so he wasn't worried. "Don't worry, everyone. We're in the space door. Xiao Bai and I will bring you out," Tang Zheng comforted gently. "Space door?" Fog and Wild Dog cried out in shock. They had only heard of the space door before, but they had never personally entered one. They subconsciously looked left and right, as if they wanted to see something, but it was pitch black everywhere. They couldn't see anything. "Xiao Bai, let's begin." Tang Zheng didn't want to spend too much time in the space door, so he joined forces with Xiao Bai to find the exit. The space door could lead to many worlds. Of course, they couldn't just barge into other worlds. Besides, even if they wanted to, they couldn't find the door, so they couldn't enter. However, Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai were very familiar with the space door that led to Sky Beyond. Last time, they needed Xiao Bai's guidance. This time, the two of them joined forces and quickly found the space door. A large door suddenly opened. Light shone in from the entrance, attracting the attention of Fog and Wild Dog. They craned their necks and opened their eyes wide, as if they wanted to see something. However, before they could see anything, the Summersall Cloud whizzed through the space door and returned to Sky Beyond. Sunlight shone down from the sky. For a moment, they couldn't get used to it. Wild Dog half closed his eyes and looked around, as if looking for the space door. However, the space door had quietly closed. There was no trace of it. "Where's the space door?" Wild Dog asked bitterly. "It's closed." "Sigh, what a pity. I haven't seen enough yet. I can't see anything." Fog glared at him and said, "By the time you see the door, the food will be cold." Wild Dog laughed embarrassedly. "Master, you're still the best. If it wasn't for your last sword, we would have been doomed." Xiaobai calmed down and recalled this battle. He gradually understood how Tianwang's strength and the gap between them. Of course, he felt that the last sword was very amazing. It was no less than how Tianwang's. Tang Zheng was also slightly proud. At that critical moment, he didn't use the Taiji two forms sword technique. Instead, he used his self-created move, Heaven and Earth Fusion. Real knowledge came from practice. This time, he had perfectly verified the power of Heaven and Earth Fusion. One could imagine how excited he was. The sword technique he created was no less than other sword techniques. In fact, it was even better. He had a strong confidence that in the future, he would be able to create a complete set of sword techniques, not just a few scattered sword moves. He gritted his teeth and strengthened his belief. Taking a deep breath, he calmed down and said, "But I'm still no match for Hao Tianwang. He's really too strong." The others felt the same and fell into silence at the same time. Seeing the depressed mood, Xiao Bai said, unhappily, "He has cultivated for tens of thousands of years. Master, you've only cultivated for a few years. Comparing the two, the difference is obvious." "What? You've only cultivated for a few years?" This sentence shocked Fog and Wild Dog. They looked at Tang Zheng in disbelief. If this sentence was said by someone else, they would definitely snort in disdain. However, these words came from Little White's mouth, so the credibility of it increased greatly. No one would doubt it. The two of them looked at each other and saw the complicated look in each other's eyes. It was difficult to describe. They only felt that this was a situation that only appeared in myths and legends. "What's there to be surprised about?" Xiaobai said as if he was used to it. The Fog and Wild Dog both wanted to die. They really wanted to find a hole in the ground and hide in it. This was not worth making a fuss about, as they had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years and were far from Tang Zheng's level. Comparing the two, they were so ashamed that they couldn't show their faces. They were extremely weak. Fog originally looked down on Tang Zheng. Now, it was even more indescribable. He didn't dare to look at Tang Zheng directly. Chapter 1534. In the Suicide Valley, Tang Zheng and the other three had returned. The few of them had analyzed the situation and decided to return to the Suicide Valley. After all, this time, they had indeed found out that the news that Hao Tianwang was not dead was too explosive. They had to send it back as soon as possible to prevent the ancestor and the others from taking extreme actions and being discovered by the other party. Seeing the triumphant return of the few of them, the ancestor led his subordinates to welcome them. After a round of greetings, when they told the truth, they were all shocked. The news that Hao Tianwang was not dead was like an atomic bomb that exploded in their hearts. Many people's expressions became unnatural. The ancestor's eyes flickered as he scanned the surroundings. He gritted his teeth and said, "What is this reaction of yours? It's good that this traitor is not dead. In the future, we will have a chance to kill this traitor with our own hands. This is the blessing of the imperial family's ancestors." The ancestors' words were enlightening, causing the depressed mood to improve and boosting everyone's morale. Xiaobai knew that he should stand up and not move forward. He stood in front of everyone and said fearlessly, "Hao Tianwang is not dead. There is nothing to be afraid of. In the future, I will personally kill him and pay tribute to the dead ancestors. From then on, we will no longer have to hide in this suicide valley." Xiao Bai was the backbone, and his words were no less effective than the ancestors. Everyone's eyes lit up as they looked at him. "Kill the traitor! Kill the traitor!" The Fog cleverly raised his arms and shouted. The others were encouraged and shouted excitedly. The crowd was furious and swept away the depression. Tang Zheng looked at Little White with admiration. He was normal very quickly and already had the characteristics of a leader. In time, he would definitely unify the sky beyond heaven and take revenge for the imperial family, fulfilling his long-cherished wish. A moment later, the ancestor, Tang Zheng, Xiao Bai, and the fog came to a quiet room. There was no one else, and the atmosphere became heavy again. Previously, it was necessary to boost the morale, but now, it was time to discuss countermeasures. This was very heavy. Your Majesty, Hao Tianwang has a special ability to suppress the royal family. Do we have a countermeasure? The elder ancestor asked earnestly. This was what he was most worried about. Hao Tianwang had actually created such a heaven-defying ability. He was simply the bane of the royal family. He couldn't help but worry. Of course, he glanced at Tang Zheng from time to time. The fog had already reported the battle situation to him in detail, especially the last sword attack from Tang Zheng, which could be said to be a miracle. Although the old ancestor did not see it with his own eyes, his heart swayed and fluctuated. Xiao Bai lowered his head in shame and said, "Ancestor, I don't have a way for now." "No way?" The elder ancestor's heart skipped a beat. Hearing this from His Majesty was no different from being struck by lightning. However, the elder ancestor was used to seeing storms and waves, so he quickly calmed down and said, "No one can compare to the royal family's ability. How could that traitor suppress them so easily? There must be another way, but His Majesty hasn't thought of it yet." The fog had heard all kinds of stories about the royal family since he was young, so he was very confident in the royal family. He nodded heavily and agreed, "That's for sure. His Majesty will definitely think of a good way." Xiao Bai was even more ashamed when he heard this. Although he had inherited the memories of the royal family, he did not completely inherit the royal family's ability. Xiao Bai resentfully said, "I also don't know what to do." After pausing for a moment, his gaze fell on Tang Zheng, and he said with expectation, "Master, your sword forced that traitor to retreat. Perhaps you have a way, right?" Now, he could only pin his hopes on Tang Zheng. Among everyone, he was the only one who could go against Hao Tianwang. Tang Zheng's face sank, and he shook his head and said, "My cultivation base is too far away from Hao Tianwang's. I was only lucky to be able to use the heaven and earth integration move this time. I might not succeed next time. Besides, I don't know if he has another move." He did not continue, but the meaning of his words could not be more obvious. He was not confident either. The few people's faces became particularly solemn, and a few dark clouds seemed to crawl on their foreheads. The elder ancestor thought for a long time and finally said, "Hao Tianwang's cultivation base is indeed very powerful. I think he's already at the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm. We're not his match now, but it doesn't mean that we won't be in the future. Therefore, it's imperative to improve His Majesty's cultivation base." It's easier said than done to improve his cultivation base in a hurry. Xiao Bai smiled bitterly. The elder ancestor's eyes became deep, and he said mysteriously, "Others might not be able to do it, but the imperial family has the ability to create miracles." Xiao Bai heard the implied meaning and looked at the elder ancestor curiously. The others were not fools, and they looked at the elder ancestor at the same time. The elder ancestor no longer mystified and revealed the answer. When the late emperor was heavily injured back then, he already expected the imperial family's great calamity to come, so he left a backup plan for his descendants. A backup plan? Xiao Bai exclaimed. It was obvious that it was the first time Yi Wu heard about this. He looked at the elder ancestor in disbelief. Yes, a backup plan. The late emperor once said that only the imperial family's descendants can open this secret. What's going on? Xiao Bai asked impatiently. The heavenly palace. The elder ancestor reached out, and a ball of light burst out from his huge palm. It was dazzling and eye-catching. The heavenly palace? What's that? Everyone looked at his palm in surprise. The light faded away, and a small palace appeared in the elder ancestor's palm. It looked like a small model and was very unique. The elder ancestor said, "This is the heavenly palace." What's the use of the heavenly palace? It's very useful. The elder ancestor said mysteriously. Didn't I just say it? If you want to quickly increase your cultivation, then you must use the heavenly palace. It's just that the heavenly palace can only be opened by the imperial family, and only the imperial family can enter it. Outsiders can't do anything about it. With just a few words, everyone had a certain understanding. Miwu couldn't help but say in disappointment, "So, the heavenly palace is useless to others." Of course, it's precisely because of this point that the imperial family hasn't returned all these years, and I haven't taken out the heavenly palace. This is because the heavenly palace is useless to us. The elder ancestor's words were filled with helplessness and disappointment. This was because he knew the heavenly palaces function the best, so he couldn't help but feel regret after losing this opportunity. You said that the heavenly palace can quickly increase one's cultivation. Then how do we do it? Xiaobai asked. The elder ancestor grinned and said, "The heavenly palace has its own universe, and time is completely different from the outside world. It has two different rules. One day outside is 1 year, 10 years, or even 100 years inside." What? One day outside is 1 year, 10 years, or even 100 years inside? Elder ancestor, are you sure this isn't a joke? Xiaobai was shocked, and his eyes were wide open with disbelief. The others were similar. This theory was unheard of, and for a moment, no one believed it. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1535. Everyone was skeptical, thinking that this was a fantasy story. His almost equal to the old ancestor didn't mind and understood their reactions. He calmly said, "I understand that you don't understand the details and have such doubts. But I want to say that this is absolutely true, and I'm not exaggerating. Moreover, I don't dare to lie in front of His Majesty." "Then tell us more details," Xiaobai urged. If all of this was true, he knew very well what it meant. Others spent 10 years to cultivate, but in the Universal Palace, they only needed 10 days, 1 day, or even less. What kind of concept was this? This was a huge cheat. How could others compare to him? Even Tang Zheng couldn't remain calm. He knew the significance of this. The old ancestor continued to speak. The Universal Palace was passed down from generation to generation by the imperial family's ancestors. It was unknown who had refined such a miraculous treasure. However, every member of the imperial family would cultivate in the Universal Palace from a young age. This way, their cultivation speed would increase greatly, and others would not be able to compare. The imperial family's position could be stabilized forever. This was because the imperial family didn't need to worry about a lack of successors. Even a mediocre person could become an expert with the Universal Palace. The Universal Palace could make the saying, "Diligence makes up for stupidity," very simple. Moreover, there was a restriction on the Universal Palace. Only the imperial family could enter to cultivate. Others couldn't. Even if they obtained the Universal Palace, they could only stare at it. Where could they find such a treasure? Only a few people knew about the existence of the Universal Palace. Back then, the old ancestor was one of the protectors and naturally knew about this. Moreover, when the late emperor entrusted the Universal Palace to him before his death, he had also told him earnestly. That was why he knew the Universal Palace like the back of his hand. After hearing this, everyone looked at Xiao Bai with envy. This was truly a great opportunity. This is an era of relying on one's father. Tang Jin couldn't help but joke. However, he was sincerely happy for Xiao Bai in his heart. Upon hearing this, Xiao Bai looked at Tang Zheng. He already believed the patriarch's words, so he said, "Master, come with me into the Universal Palace." Tang Zheng felt warmth in his heart. He smiled and refused. "Didn't you hear what the patriarch said? Only members of the royal family could enter, and no one else could. Therefore, you can go in and cultivate with peace of mind." The patriarch also advised, "Your Majesty, this isn't a child's play. Furthermore, it's not like you can just enter the heavenly palace." Back then, the late emperor had also tried to let others enter the heavenly palace, but he didn't succeed. Therefore, only the royal family can enter. The old ancestor's words were resolute and unquestionable. "No," Xiao Bai firmly shook his head and looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze. "If Master doesn't go in, I won't go in either." The old ancestor was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Xiao Bai to be so stubborn. Xiao Bai's expression was firm, as if he had steeled his heart and would not waver at all. Tang Jing's expression turned serious as he said solemnly, "Xiao Bai, don't mess around. This is a good thing, and I'm sincerely happy for you. You can enter the heavenly palace alone, and I'm still hoping that you can help me after your cultivation has greatly increased." Xiao Bai drooped his head and said, "Master, but I also want to go with you. We haven't even tried yet, so how can we say that it's a failure?" Tang Jing bitterly smiled and shook his head. The old ancestor also earnestly advised, "Your Majesty, this is something that countless members of the royal family have tried before. However, other than the royal family, no one else has been able to enter the heavenly palace without exception." Xiao Bai bit his lips and stubbornly said, "It wasn't possible in the past, but that doesn't mean it won't be possible now, and it won't be possible in the future. The world changes, so who can say for sure?" The old ancestor sighed inwardly. He was filled with emotions towards the relationship between the two, but he was also helpless. His Majesty is young and full of vigor. He won't cry until he sees the coffin. Fine, then let him try it. He'll know that my words are true and that I have no intention of deceiving him. Thus, the old ancestor's tone changed and said, "Since His Majesty is so insistent, then let's try it once. Who knows, we might really be able to create a miracle." Even he himself didn't believe these words, thinking that it was all nonsense. If Xiao Bai wasn't His Majesty, he definitely wouldn't mess around like this. It was a complete waste of time. Tang Jing helplessly shook his head and bitterly smiled. "Xiao Bai, why do you have to do this? How will we know the answer if we don't try? Then let's try it." He shrugged and compromised, treating it as a way to cross the hurdle in Xiao Bai's heart. Fog rolled her eyes and glanced sideways at Tang Jing. Although she admitted that he had extraordinary abilities, she couldn't help but criticize him in her heart. He was overestimating himself and making a fool of himself. Xiao Bai excitedly widened his eyes and urged, "Old ancestor, how do we start? Your Majesty, drip your blood on the heavenly palace and then circulate your divine power. Everything will fall into place, and you'll be able to enter the heavenly palace." The old ancestor pretended to be calm, but the excitement in his words was obvious. "That's simple?" Xiao Bai asked in disbelief. "It's simple for His Majesty, but it's harder than ascending to heaven for others." The old ancestor sighed with emotion. Indeed, it was not easy to obtain the blood of the imperial family. Moreover, the imperial family had to circulate their own power. This was something that no one could replace. Both were indispensable. Xiao Bai let Tang Jing stand beside him and extended a finger. A drop of blood flew out from his fingertip and landed on the heavenly palace. Instantly, the heavenly palace shone brightly and slowly flew from the old ancestor's palm. "Wow!" The others opened their mouths in surprise as they watched this miraculous scene. Xiao Bai concentrated and circulated his power. The blood completely merged with the heavenly palace. A red light shot out from the heavenly palace and landed on Xiao Bai's body. The red light was restrained and did not spread outwards. It completely enveloped Xiao Bai's body. The old ancestor nodded in relief. This scene was very familiar. It had been many years since he last saw it. It reminded him of his past and made him sigh. Suddenly, the red light fluctuated and moved to the side, moving to Tang Jing's body. "This is what's going on?" The veins on the old ancestor's forehead throbbed, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He didn't even blink as he stared at Tang Jing. He knew very well that once he was enveloped by the red light, it was very likely that he would enter the heavenly palace. This was what the late emperor had told him. However, the red light was immune to others and did not land on others. This scene was completely different. Tang Jing quietly stood beside Little White, and the red light took the initiative to fall on his body. Did this mean anything? The old ancestor's heartstrings could not help but tighten. The fog did not know what was going on. There was still a playful expression on his face. After a while, the red light completely enveloped Tang Jing's body. He was no different from Xiao Bai. At this time, the fog gradually realized something. He turned his head to look at the old ancestor, and found that his expression had become very complicated. It was even more complicated than seeing a ghost. The red light enveloped Xiao Bai and Tang Zheng without any difference. Chapter 1536. Tang Zheng and Little White disappeared into thin air, and a heavenly palace that was shining with boundless light also disappeared, falling back into the ancestor's palm. Miwu hurriedly came over and asked anxiously, "Ancestor, where is that person?" She was naturally referring to Tang Zheng. The ancestor understood her question, and his expression became unnatural. He stammered, "He also entered the Universal Palace." "Ah!" Miwu screamed. Although she had already guessed this point, the shock in her heart was indescribable when she heard the confirmation from the ancestor. "How can this be? How'd he go in? Didn't you say only the imperial family can enter?" The ancestor nodded resentfully. "Indeed, only the imperial family can enter. But why did he go in?" Miwu asked. "Could he be a member of the imperial family?" "Of course not." The ancestor refuted without thinking, but he couldn't give a reason. He could only say with a pained expression, "I don't know the exact reason. I can only ask them when they come out." Miwu's chest heaved up and down. She was so angry that she couldn't say anything. After a while, she had to admit this fact and asked unwillingly, "Then when will they come out?" "They will naturally come out after they have made some progress in their cultivation," the ancestor said helplessly. This was indeed not something he could control. Inside the Universal Palace, Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai saw a light flash in front of their eyes. They had changed places and entered a luxurious palace. Xiao Bai was startled at first, but then he cheered and almost jumped up. "Master, you've entered the Universal Palace. You've succeeded. You've really succeeded." Tang Zheng also felt that it was inconceivable. He had never thought that he would succeed. He only wanted to make Xiao Bai give up on the obsession in his heart. That was why he did this with him. He never thought that the pretense would actually become reality. He looked at himself and then looked at Xiao Bai. He really couldn't understand how he could appear in the Universal Palace. He didn't think that the ancestor was lying and deliberately deceiving him. In the past, no one other than the royal family had ever entered the Heavenly Palace, which was why there was such a rule. "Ha ha! I knew that Master would create miracles. Sure enough, I was right. I'm really a genius," Xiao Bai said complacently. "Xiao Bai, this isn't necessarily a miracle created by me. Maybe it's a miracle created by you," Tang Zheng corrected. "Myself? How is that possible?" "It's not impossible. Only the imperial family can open the Universal Palace, so the possibility of you creating a miracle is greater." Xiao Bai thought for a while and shook his head. "No, I think it was you who created the miracle, Master." Tang Zheng smiled bitterly. There was no answer to this question, and there was no need to keep arguing. Since he was lucky enough to enter the Universal Palace, he couldn't miss out on this heaven-sent opportunity. "Xiao Bai, do you feel a problem with the passage of time?" Tang Zheng changed the topic. Xiao Bai's expression became serious. He looked around and said, "I don't." Tang Zheng's perception of time wasn't particularly accurate, but he had a way. He quickly reached out his hand and looked at his watch. This was the watch his grandfather gave him. Although it wasn't worth much, it had a special meaning to him, so he always carried it with him and carefully cared for it. Even now, it could still be used normally. However, something strange happened. "Why did the watch stop?" Xiao Bai asked in bewilderment. Tang Zheng stared at the watch as if there was a flower on it, firmly attracting his gaze. Suddenly, Tang Zheng looked up as if he had discovered a new continent. He shouted, "No, it's not that time has stopped, but it's slowed down." "Slow down?" Xiao Bai was confused as he stared at the watch. His and Tang Zheng's eyes were sharper than an eagle's. Once they focused, they immediately found clues. This watch is indeed slowed down. Moreover, it has become incomparably slow. It's as if it's not moving at all. Tang Zheng nodded. "Your judgment is very accurate. This is the truth. It seems that the ancestor was right. The time in the Universal Palace is indeed different from the outside world. However, he was wrong about one thing. A day outside is not a year, 10 years, or 100 years inside. It's just that the time here has become incomparably slow. Ah, so that's how it is. Xiaobai suddenly understood, but he still had a stomach full of questions. Then why did it become like this? Tang Jung thought for a while and said, "The Universal Palace is equivalent to another space. The laws of time in our space are not the same as here. That's why the time is different. It's precisely because of this that we can do many things in the Universal Palace in a day outside, such as cultivating. This is really too magical." Xiao Bai's eyes became brighter and brighter. However, why did the ancestor say that the time in the Universal Palace varies from person to person? Tang Zheng naturally remembered the ancestor's words. For example, the time in the outside world was different for the time in the Universal Palace. Some people had a longer time, while others had shorter time. Tang Zheng was temporarily unable to figure out the mystery behind this. Seeing Tang Zheng ponder for a long time, he shook his head regretfully. Xiaobai let out a long sigh, embarrassed in his heart. Let's not think about this. Let's seize the time to cultivate. This is the most important thing. Tang Zheng could not hold back his excitement and said, "All right, let's begin." The two of them sat down cross-legged. Xiaobai's body flashed, and he transformed into his true body. Cultivating with his true body was naturally the fastest. A ball of fire swam around his body. At the same time, blood veins also swam around his body. The blood light actually penetrated his thick hair and appeared on the outside like blood vessels. It was extremely magical. This was the effect of the bloodthirsty scepter. The ancestor was right. Although the bloodthirsty scepter was powerful and had boundless power, it would still affect its owner. Xiaobai had used the bloodthirsty scepter repeatedly in battle. He had formed a bloodline connection with the bloodthirsty scepter, so his body was unavoidably affected. However, after all, it had only been a short time, so the effect was still very limited. Tang Zheng's mind settled down. He first activated the Heavenly Book. The ancient passage scroll and the Heavenly Book were of the same origin. They were Tang Zheng's foundation, so he had always been cultivating this divine ability. Therefore, with this opportunity, he chose to cultivate the Heavenly Book first. In his mind, the Heavenly Book that was flashing with light slowly unfolded page by page. The divine abilities that he had already comprehended began to circulate on their own, while the divine abilities that he had yet to comprehend were like balls of fog, waiting for Tang Zheng to push aside the clouds and see their true essence. Tang Zheng was immersed. At first, he did not comprehend any new profundities. However, as time passed, and he studied the Heavenly Book again and again, the profundities gradually appeared. However, he did not realize that time was passing slower and slower. Especially after he comprehended the new profundities of the Heavenly Book, time seemed to have stopped. Everything came to a standstill. It was unimaginably slow. On the other hand, Xiaobai did not experience such a phenomenon. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1537. The completely different reactions of Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai meant that the two patriarchs were right. Everyone would have different encounters in the Heavenly Palace. The cultivation progress of the two would also be completely different. The mysteries of the Heavenly Book appeared bit by bit, and a huge vortex appeared above his head. As if he was enlightened, the spirit energy in the Heavenly Palace quickly gathered from the vortex to Tang Zheng's brain. There was also the spirit energy of heaven and earth in the Heavenly Palace, which allowed cultivators to cultivate normally. On the other hand, although Xiao Bai also had the spirit energy of heaven and earth continuously entering his body, it was not as spectacular as Tang Zheng's. His true qi surged upward with a whoosh. Boom! He crossed a hurdle. Boom! Another hurdle had been crossed. His vital energy rose steadily. Compared to the outside world, a year had passed. Tang Zheng was very clear about that. He was already on the verge of a breakthrough. The words on the Heavenly Book flickered with light. The words seemed to have magical power, and they were deeply imprinted into Tang Zheng's brain. Everything came naturally. His cultivation level went up another level, and he broke through to the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm. His eyes suddenly opened, and the light in his eyes flickered. It seemed to contain endless mysteries. The heavenly book is indeed extraordinary. No wonder Yanqingyi became so powerful. He turned his head to look at Xiao Bai. His huge body was quiet, and there was no movement at all. It was obvious that he was still cultivating. I wonder how fast Xiao Bai's time is passing. He shook his head. He did not know the answer, but he had enough understanding of his time. Although it was equivalent to cultivating for a year, only half a day had passed. Perhaps compared to his previous cultivation speed, it was very slow for him to cultivate for a year to break through one level. However, that was in the past. He was now in the Mahayana realm. Moreover, the higher the cultivation level, the harder it was to break through one level. It could be seen from how Tianwang's seclusion. He had been in seclusion for more than 10,000 years, and his cultivation level had not broken through much. He had only broken through one level, which was from the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm to the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm. Compared to how Tianwang, Tang Zheng's speed was already like a rocket. In fact, cultivation was like this. The further one progressed, the more difficult it became. Many people were stuck at a certain threshold their entire lives, unable to take another step forward. He took a deep breath. He was well aware of this point, so he felt very fortunate. The energy transformed by the heavenly book surged through his meridians and merged with his genuine qi. His genuine qi was originally composed of many kinds of energy. Other than the heavenly book, there was also the Ksitigarbha Sutra. The power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra was suppressed. The two opposing forces originally maintained a balance. Now that this balance was broken, the power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra was in danger. Tang Zheng had already realized this. This was a very dangerous sign. It was impossible for him to give up on both the Ksitigarbha Sutra and the heavenly tomes. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, I can't let the heavenly tomes dominate. I'll cultivate the Ksitigarbha Sutra next. As he chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, Sanskrit words flew out of his mouth and attached themselves to his body bit by bit. Not long after, they completely formed a Kasaya. The Kasaya shone with golden light and enveloped him, making him look very dignified. Time passed. Suddenly, a golden spot of light flew out of the golden Kasaya. This spot of light was very dazzling, completely covering the golden Kasaya. It was sparkling like a bright star that was slowly rising. Tang Zheng seemed to have understood something. He slowly opened his eyes, his gaze firmly fixed on this golden spot of light. The golden spot of light flew to the top of Tang Zheng's head and suddenly stopped. Tang Zheng didn't know what would happen, but he had a feeling that something would happen. This was like a layer of window paper. Before he pierced through it, he would always be looking at the flowers in the fog. He didn't stop chanting the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Over and over again, the power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra increased bit by bit. His cultivation level was rapidly increasing, and his genuine qi was rising steadily. Suddenly, the golden spot of light fell rapidly again. Like a meteor, it fell heavily on the top of Tang Zheng's head. A heavy feeling of power pressed down on the top of his head, as if his neck was about to break, but this pressure quickly disappeared. He suddenly found that there was an additional golden spot of light on his scalp. The light of the spot of light gradually converged and was blocked by his head, making it difficult for others to notice. However, Tang Zheng knew very well what this spot of light meant. When the spot of light fell on his scalp, his genuine qi was like a stormy sea, violently slapping his meridians. His genuine qi rose steadily and broke through the shackles again, causing his cultivation to reach the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm in one fell swoop. A golden light flashed in his eyes. He let out a long breath and stopped chanting the Ksitigarbha Sutra. However, the light of the golden Kasaya took a long time to fade away, and then the Kasaya disappeared. However, the spot of light on his scalp still existed. It was like a scar that was deeply imprinted on his scalp and couldn't be erased. This spot of light is something new. Although I've cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra for so long in the past, I've never seen such a scene. Li Xiaodian also cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra, but he didn't have such an opportunity for the time being. As for whether the Dizang of Goguryeo had such an opportunity, I don't know. If there's a chance next time, I'll definitely ask him. However, there was no doubt that this spot of light was a good thing. It was just a spot of light that allowed his cultivation to rise to another level. This was from the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm to the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm. It was more difficult than breaking through to the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm previously, and the degree of difficulty was unimaginable. However, he broke through so easily. If there were a few more spots of light, then wouldn't my cultivation level soar rapidly? Nevertheless, he knew very well that this was his wishful thinking. First, he didn't know when he would touch this spot of light, so there was no way to predict it. Well, I must not be greedy. This harvest is already rare and valuable. He secretly warned himself. His divine sense sank into his body. The only remaining main vein had already expanded several times. It was like a wide river, and true qi was flowing majestically within it. When his divine sense entered the purple mansion, he couldn't help but be shocked. Yuanying had undergone earth-shaking changes. It was actually moving its body. It was really like a baby that couldn't bear the loneliness and wanted to jump around. It was even eager to try, wanting to jump out of his body. What's going on? Last time, he found that Yuanying was alive and its eyeballs could move. It was very spiritual. However, this time, Yuanying could move its body. This change made him even more shocked. Last time, he tried to communicate with Yuanying to no avail. Could he communicate normally this time? Chapter 1538. Yuanying, can you hear my voice? Tang Zheng tried to ask. Yuanying seemed to have heard his voice. Her eyes widened as she looked up. Her clear eyes were like a clear spring, extremely cute. Sigh, she still can't speak. Tang Zheng sighed. This way, there was no way to communicate with Yuanying. He stared at Yuanying for a long time, but he still couldn't find any clues. He had to give up for the time being. Yuanying was magical. He didn't have any experience and couldn't explain it one by one. He could only wait for Xiao Ba to wake up or go out to ask the old ancestor. After all, he was an expert who had cultivated to the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm. Almost no one he knew could compare to him. I've already reached the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm. Should I continue to cultivate? Tang Zheng pondered. He couldn't miss this opportunity. When he was about to circulate his power, he found a problem that almost scared him. Why is there so much pure yang energy? He was shocked as he stared at the pure yang energy in his body. The pure yang energy was originally very peaceful. Because there was a large amount of pure yin energy, it was almost suppressed. But at this moment, the pure yang energy had increased too much. This balance was completely broken, and the pure yang energy became restless. If he continued, it was very likely that the pure yang energy would explode. He wasn't by the side of his beloved woman. If the pure yang energy exploded, it was equivalent to losing his life. He didn't dare to continue cultivating. Boom! A loud sound came from his body. Unknowingly, the dragon god art was circulating. His dragon seal emitted a burst of bright golden light. Whoosh! The golden light enveloped his body and turned into dragon scales. It was as if he was wearing a dragon scale armor. He looked mighty. Roar! The dragon's roar broke through the air. He looked up to the sky and roared. With a shake of his body, he transformed into a true dragon. His huge body was comparable to Xiao Bai. Shaking its dragon head and tail, it began to fly in the universal palace, circling the roof and dancing nonstop. Tang Zheng's consciousness was very clear that all of these changes were completed automatically. There was no control of his consciousness at all. In the dark, he realized that his cultivation breakthrough was so fast that it caused the changes in the Dragon God art. His cultivation of the Dragon God art had already reached the 9th level, and he had already ascended to the 9th floor. He had even fused with a set of dragon bones on the 9th floor, thus obtaining a true dragon's body. What exactly were the remaining 9 floors of Langyu Pavilion? He didn't know, and neither did Xiao Bai. Moreover, Xiao Bai had already gone to look for the dragon race's habitat and then look for the Dragon King. Perhaps the Dragon King would know the answer to all of this. The changes in the Dragon God technique seemed to have given him hope. Could it be that he actually had the opportunity to ascend to the remaining 9 floors of the Langya Pavilion? The power of the Dragon God art rose rapidly. It had already reached its peak, but it still didn't stop. Tang Zheng didn't deliberately control it. His power was like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins. The 9-clawed little golden dragon in the dragon's seal gradually changed. 2 golden lights gathered on the little golden dragon's head. After a long time, the light dissipated, and 2 small horns appeared on the little golden dragon's head. Dragon horns! Tang Zheng immediately recognized that these were the legendary dragon horns. It wasn't a single horn, but 2 dragon horns. Although they only protruded a little from the top of his head, they were still dragon horns. Why does my head hurt? Suddenly, he screamed and subconsciously covered the top of his head with his dragon claws. However, 2 golden lights rushed out from the top of his head and broke through his skin. A tearing pain penetrated deep into his bone marrow. It really hurts. Tang Zheng gnashed his teeth, but he didn't struggle anymore. Instead, he let the pain spread to every cell. He had already realized that these were the dragon horns growing. The little golden dragon in the dragon seal was a miniature version of his true body. Any changes in the little golden dragon would appear on his true body. The little golden dragon already had 2 dragon horns, so his true body would also grow dragon horns. The tearing pain continued, but he clearly felt something break free from his skin and emerge little by little. He took a deep breath and endured the pain. He concentrated, not allowing the slightest bit of negligence. Unknowingly, the pain gradually disappeared. A golden light flickered on top of his head, and a mysterious aura rippled out. Xiao Bai suddenly opened his eyes and just happened to see this scene. His eyes widened in surprise, and he asked in alarm, "Master, what happened to you?" "Phew!" Tang Zheng let out a heavy breath. His gaze fell on Xiao Bai's body. He couldn't help but smile and said comfortingly, "Xiao Bai, don't worry, I'm fine." Xiao Bai let out a sigh of relief and said, "It's good that you're fine. It's just that, Master, there seems to be a big change on top of your head." Tang Zheng stretched out his dragon claw and gently touched it. 2 dragon horns grew on top of his head. They weren't long, just like the tip of a small lotus. But even if the 2 dragon horns hadn't fully grown yet, it still added a lot of dragon's might to him, making his aura even more vigorous. "These are dragon horns." Tang Zheng knew what Xiao Bai was referring to, so he explained. "Dragon horns?" Tang Zheng raised his eyelids and glanced at the horn on top of his head. It was a horn unique to the royal family. These dragon horns might be the same as his horn, a unique characteristic of their respective race. "What's the use of these dragon horns?" Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "I'm not sure yet, but I'll know in the future." Originally, Tang Zheng thought that the changes in the Dragon God art would allow him to find the secrets of the remaining 9 floors of the Langya Pavilion. But in the end, only a pair of dragon horns grew out and didn't fulfill his wish. Even so, he wasn't discouraged. After all, this was not a small gain. The power of the Dragon God art had already calmed down. Other than the abnormal agitation of the pure yang energy, there were no other abnormalities. This time, it could be said that he had gained a lot. His cultivation had risen to the 6th grade of the Mahayana realm, and he had grown dragon horns. He looked at Xiao Bai with a burning gaze. The other party's aura had also undergone a tremendous change. He subconsciously asked, "Xiao Bai, your cultivation seems to have improved a lot." When Xiao Bai heard this, he was overjoyed. He couldn't hold back his joy and nodded impatiently, saying, "Master, my harvest is too great." The ancestor was right. One day outside of the heavenly palace is equivalent to a year inside. Just now, it was equivalent to me cultivating for a year. My cultivation has soared, and now I've touched the threshold of the 5th grade of the Mahayana realm. 5th grade of the Mahayana realm? Tang Zheng said in surprise. It turned out that there was only a line between Xiao Bai in Tang Zhang's cultivation, which was the 3rd grade of the Mahayana realm. Now that he had reached the threshold of the 5th grade of the Mahayana realm, he was just one step away. He believed that it wouldn't be long before Xiao Bai pierced through this layer of window paper and reached the 5th grade of the Mahayana realm. Xiao Bai's cultivation had increased by 1 level, while Tang Zhang's cultivation had increased by 2 levels. Moreover, Tang Zhang's time was equivalent to 2 years, which was twice as long as Xiao Bai's. This meant that the Heavenly Palace, which was prepared for the imperial family, was actually more helpful to Tang Zhang. Chapter 1539. When Xiao Bai heard that Tang Zhang had actually broken through 2 levels of cultivation in one go, and that 2 years had passed, he was not jealous. Instead, he cheered and was sincerely happy for him. It was as if he was happier and prouder than his achievements. Master, I knew you could do it. That traitor is only at the 9th stage of the Mahayana stage, and you are only 5 levels away from him. I believe that in the near future, you will definitely be able to surpass him. When that time comes, let's see how arrogant he is. Xiao Bai couldn't help but say, it seems like there's only a difference of 3 levels, but it is actually a chasm. Many people are unable to cross this chasm in their entire lives. Tang Zhang was not as optimistic as Xiao Bai, because he knew how difficult this task was. Xiao Bai believed in Tang Zhang and said disapprovingly, it is impossible for others, but I believe that Master can. Isn't there only a difference of 5 levels in your cultivation? Maybe you can catch up from behind and surpass Hao Tianwang before me. Tang Zhang encouraged. Xiao Bai nodded heavily. I will definitely work hard. Tang Zhang could not continue to cultivate in the Heavenly Palace, as he was worried that the pure yang energy would truly erupt. Xiao Bai's harvest was not small, so he had to consolidate his cultivation first. Thus, they left the Heavenly Palace together. The scene in front of them changed, and they returned to the Suicide Valley once again. The fog had been guarding the Heavenly Palace the entire time, and when she suddenly saw 2 figures appear in front of her, she couldn't help but be shocked and almost cried out in alarm. When she saw the 2 of them clearly, she patted her chest with lingering fear and said, Your Majesty, so it's you guys who are back. Why are you so fast? It had only been a day, and he thought that they would be gone for a long time, so he only left the fog to guard the Heavenly Palace. Not long for you, but for us a lot of time has passed. Xiao Bai smiled slightly, and he also transformed into his human form. The fog seemed to be deep in thought. She suppressed the doubts in her heart and impatiently said, I will go and invite the ancestor. He will definitely be very happy to know that your Majesty has returned. After saying that, she glanced at Tang Zhang with mixed feelings. Xiao Bai entering the Heavenly Palace was a matter of course, but Tang Zhang actually followed him in. This was equivalent to Tang Zhang beating everyone else. Naturally, they did not feel good in their hearts. Not long after, the ancestor hurriedly entered the room. The Heavenly Palace was an extremely confidential matter. Other than the few people involved at that time, no one else knew about it. Therefore, only the ancestor and the fog widened their eyes and stared at them. It had only been a day since they last saw each other, but Tang Zhang was keenly aware that the ancestor's body had changed quite a bit. If it was in the past, he definitely wouldn't have noticed, but now that he was at the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm, his eyes could see through many things. Before he could ask, the ancestor spoke first. Your Majesty, you're finally back. What did you find? When this question was raised, the ancestor's heart also became anxious. He was both looking forward to it and worried that Xiao Bai would not gain anything. This was a contradictory mentality. Ancestor, my harvest is not small. I'm now almost at the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm. 5th stage of the Mahayana realm? The ancestor cheered. This meant that Xiao Bai's strength had surpassed his. He was also at the 4th stage of the Mahayana realm, but he had not touched the threshold of the 5th stage of the Mahayana realm. His cultivation had been imprisoned in this realm for so many years, and there was no way for him to cross this threshold. With the blessing of the late emperor, your Majesty's cultivation has improved so quickly. This is the fortune of the imperial family and us. The day of taking back the Outland is just around the corner. The ancestor was almost in tears as he lamented with mixed feelings. Xiaobai was worried and said empathetically, "Ancestor, don't worry. I'll work harder to cultivate." Naturally, Fog's face also showed a happy expression. She glanced at Tang Zheng and curled her lips. Originally, her bad impression of Tang Zheng had been reduced, but Tang Zheng and Xiaobai entered the Universal Palace together, which made Fog quite unhappy. She thought that Tang Zheng took advantage of Xiaobai. What's the use of him taking advantage? The Universal Palace is used by the Imperial family, and he's just an outsider. Even if he entered by chance, it's impossible for him to gain anything. Fog criticized silently. She had an idea and deliberately said sarcastically, "Your Majesty's cultivation speed is naturally unmatched, unlike some people who took advantage of a huge advantage and entered the Universal Palace. In the end, they definitely didn't gain anything at all, so they didn't even dare to say anything." There was no doubt that her words were directed at Tang Zheng. Even a deaf person could hear it. "Fog, you're wrong." Xiaobai quickly defended his master's dignity. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, was calm and collected. Fog stared at Tang Zheng with burning eyes. Looking at his reaction, she thought that he was ashamed and dared not say anything. "Your Majesty, you don't have to put in a good word for someone. We all know the function of the Universal Palace. How could an outsider gain anything from it? It can only be considered as gaining some knowledge. This is already a great benefit." The Fog did not catch the hidden meaning in Little White's words. Instead, he thought that Little White was protecting him. Tang Zheng could not help but laugh. He had somewhat guessed Fog's thoughts. Regarding the fact that he could enter the Universal Palace, the ancestor and Fog probably had a lot to say about it. "Fog, you're really wrong. Do you know how much Master's cultivation increased in the Universal Palace?" Xiaobai was so angry that he looked like he would not give up until he cleared Tang Zheng's name. His cultivation increased? Fog was shocked, but she immediately calmed down and said indifferently, "How much can his cultivation increase? I'm afraid it's just a little bit of true qi." Xiaobai could not help but roll his eyes. He was speechless. After a while, he said, "Fog, you really have a problem with your eyesight. Master's cultivation increased by 2 levels. He's now at the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm. He's the one with the highest cultivation among us." "What? Increased by 2 levels? 6th stage of the Mahayana realm?" Fog was stunned for a moment, thinking that she had misheard. After confirming that she did not hear wrongly, she screamed in shock as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. The ancestor's eyelids twitched violently a few times. His eyesight was more experienced than Fog's. Moreover, he was once at the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm, so he had a lot of experience. Therefore, when Xiaobai refuted Fog again and again, the ancestor focused and carefully observed Tang Zheng. Suddenly, his pupil shrunk as he really saw some clues. Tang Zheng's aura had indeed changed tremendously compared to before he entered the Universal Palace. Unfortunately, all of his attention was on Xiaobai, so he had overlooked it. "How is this possible? You're more successful than His Majesty? His Majesty is a member of the Imperial family, and you're an outsider." The ancestor widened his eyes as if he was possessed. His reaction was even greater than Fog's as he muttered to himself. Tang Zheng's performance could be said to be shocking. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1540. Xiaobai was very satisfied with the reaction of the ancestor and the Fog. He said with pride, "Now you know how powerful Master is, right? Compared to Master, I am still 108,000 miles away. Not only that, it was equivalent to me spending a year in the Heavenly Palace, while it was equivalent to Master spending 2 years. Therefore, his situation in the Heavenly Palace completely exceeded mine." Xiaobai worked hard to push Tang Zheng to a high position, causing the ancestor and the Fog to feel as if their hearts had suffered a heavy blow, unable to calm down for a long time. Tang Zheng was a little embarrassed and modestly waved his hand. "Xiaobai, you are exaggerating. I'm telling the truth. They don't believe in Master. so I'm telling them. Xiao Bai proudly raised his head. Now you know how powerful Master is, right? From now on, don't look down on Master. Master is more powerful than us. Therefore, in the future, if there is anyone who can defeat that traitor Hao Tianwang, Master is the most likely. The ancestor was speechless. The truth was right in front of him. It seemed that he had to reevaluate Tang Zheng's strength and position. Bewildering mist heavily snorted as she could not continue to taunt Tang Zheng. She pouted her lips in grievance and swallowed all the words she wanted to say back into her stomach. Tang Zheng did not want to continue this topic and humbly asked the ancestor for advice. Ancestor, I have always wanted to ask you a question. The ancestor paused for a moment and collected his emotions. He said seriously, What do you want to know? Ancestor, you have cultivated to the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm. Do you know what changes Yuanying will undergo during the cultivation process? For example, communicating with oneself or coming back to life. The ancestor frowned suspiciously and looked at Tang Zheng in confusion. Why do you have this question? He asked. Could it be that you have personally encountered this problem? Yes. Tang Zheng did not want to hide it, so he openly admitted it. Hiss. The ancestor sucked in a breath of cold air, his eyes wide open, as if he was looking at a monster, staring straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was confused and looked back curiously. Their eyes met, and the ancestor couldn't wait to ask, Is what you said true? Of course it's real. Tang Zheng replied without hesitation. He didn't understand why the patriarch's reaction was so big. This shouldn't be a big deal. Ancestor, is there something wrong? Of course not. The ancestor's voice suddenly rose by many decibels, and his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Why don't you tell me in detail what you mean by Yuanying coming back to life? The ancestor asked aggressively. Tang Zheng tilted his head and looked deeply at the ancestor. He then made his situation public, especially the various signs of Yuanying, which instantly attracted the attention of others. Even Xiao Bai's eyes widened. He looked at him in disbelief and asked with uncertainty, Master, how can your Yuanying be like this? Tang Zheng smiled bitterly and said, How would I know? I still want to consult you. He was so smart. How could he not see the problem? His situation was probably not a common phenomenon, but unique to himself. The ancestor sighed faintly. The way he looked at Tang Zheng changed again and again. It was completely different from before, and there was even a bit of awe. Previously, when the ancestor heard that he had broken through to the 6th stage of the Mahayana realm, he did not have such an intense reaction. However, a vision of Yuanying caused him to have such a reaction, which made Tang Zheng feel uneasy. He did not know whether the vision of Yuanying was good or bad. Miwu was even more confused. She could not figure out the deep meaning of Tang Zheng's words at all, because her cultivation was too low and she could not understand. When the ancestor saw that everyone was looking at him, he pondered for a while and slowly said, We absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth into our bodies and gather it in our dantian to form a gold core and cultivate Yuanying. From there, we can improve our strength step by step, temper our bodies, and increase our vital qi. When we cultivate to the extreme, Yuanying will change step by step. The nascent soul will become vivid and lifelike, just like another copy of us. Like a pregnant woman, the nascent soul will nurture the nascent soul, and the nascent soul will continuously provide us with power, helping us cultivate and fight. We complement each other with Yuanying. However, the ancestor paused for a moment and changed the topic. He looked at Tang Zheng and said, However, Yuanying will not come to life at all, let alone communicate with us. The last sentence was the key. It completely overturned Tang Zheng's previous doubts. Tang Zheng could not help but gasp. He had always thought that the various signs of Yuanying were normal, so he did not talk much about it with others. Only now did he realize that his nascent soul was a freak. It was completely different from the nascent souls of ordinary people, like the difference between heaven and earth. Everyone was aware of this point, and looking at Tang Zheng's fluctuating expression, they could roughly understand his mood, so no one disturbed him. allowing him to quietly digest this news. The ancestor's expression was more complicated than Tang Zheng's, and his eyes were unfathomable. After a long while, Tang Zheng calmed down a little and said with a wry smile, "Sai, I always thought this was a normal phenomenon, but now I know that I thought too simply. Now that things have come to this, there's no other way. We can only take one step at a time." With that, he shook his head. He had so many things to say, but he did not know where to start. "Master," Xiaobai shouted with mixed feelings. Tang Zheng waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to say more. "Wait a minute, you haven't heard me out." The ancestor suddenly interrupted Tang Zheng. "Now that things have come to this, what else is there to say?" Tang Zheng asked in return. The ancestor said in a deep voice, "I said that your phenomenon is not normal, and we don't have this kind of phenomenon. However, I did not say that your phenomenon is unprecedented in this world." "Precedent?" Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows, not quite understanding the ancestor's meaning. The others also looked at the ancestor curiously. The ancestor knew that it was time to unravel the mystery. If it were not for the situation with Tang Zheng, he might not have wanted to mention this matter. After all, this matter was too long ago, and it was related to the late emperor. If it were not for the fact that he had no other choice, he really did not want to mention the old matter. "Your Majesty, this matter is related to the late emperor." "It's related to the late emperor?" Xiaobai was confused and subconsciously exclaimed. "Yes, the precedent I'm talking about is the late emperor. His Yuanying also had similar signs to Tang Zheng, but that was after he cultivated to the 9th grade of the Mahayana realm. When he continued to cultivate and comprehend more powerful magic, his Yuanying had this kind of mutation. A situation that only appeared after reaching the 9th grade of the Mahayana realm. That was the only thing everyone noticed. Tang Zheng was now only at the 6th grade of the Mahayana realm, but there were signs that only appeared after the late emperor reached the 9th grade of the Mahayana realm. Didn't this mean that Tang Zheng was better than the late emperor? Chapter 1541. Xiaobai could not hold back his curiosity and impatiently asked, "Ancestor, hurry up and finish it in one breath. What exactly is going on?" The ancestor said, "According to the late emperor, Yuanying can come to life and even leave the body. That is an even more profound divine ability and is the goal of his comprehension. He believed that in time, Yuanying can truly leave the body and reach the extreme of Yuanying, clone." "Clone?" Tang Zheng exclaimed and could not help but think of the 100 Faces Star-Lord. Not only was he good at changing his appearance, but he could also create clones. During the fierce battle with him back then, he had seen him create many clones. However, the strength of each clone was not very strong, and it was more useful to confuse the opponent. Yes, it is a clone. Moreover, the strength of this clone is not inferior to the real body at all. This is equivalent to one person having the strength of 2 people. You should be able to imagine how strong this would be. The old ancestor sighed. When he first heard this news, he was also very shocked. He did not doubt it at all, because this was the late emperor's deduction. Therefore, he believed it without a doubt. Did the late emperor cultivate a clone? Xiaobai asked curiously. The ancestor sighed faintly and shook his head. The late emperor had already grasped a little of the knack and was just a little bit away from a breakthrough. He did not expect to be betrayed by that traitor, so the late emperor did not cultivate a clone. Tang Zheng sighed inwardly and felt that it was a pity. If the other party had cultivated a clone, Hao Tianwang's betrayal might not have succeeded. He could deal with a powerful emperor, but he could not deal with 2 emperors of the same strength. Does Hao Tianwang know about this? Tang Zheng asked. The ancestor shook his head without hesitation. He definitely does not know. This is something that the late emperor mentioned to me by chance. No one else would know. The late emperor did not want to mention too much about his cultivation to others. That's good. Tang Zheng secretly rejoiced. If Hao Tianwang also knew and even cultivated in this direction, with his cultivation, he might really be able to cultivate a clone. It was already extremely difficult for Tang Zheng to fight against one heavenly king Hao, and he was in a sorry state. If Heavenly King Hao still had a clone whose strength was not inferior to his own, then Tang Zheng's chances would be even slimmer. Master, other people cultivate to the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm to have this situation, but you have it now. Aren't you more powerful than them? Moreover, you will also have a clone soon? Xiaobai said excitedly, not paying attention to the fact that he was talking about his late emperor. The old ancestor was a little embarrassed, but since His Majesty had already said so, it was not good for him to interrupt. He could only sigh with emotion in his heart. This Tang Zheng was far more miraculous than he had imagined. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and said embarrassedly, cultivating a clone is easier said than done. I believe Master can do it. Xiaobai trusted Tang Zheng very much. Tang Zheng wanted to cultivate a clone, and now that he had this opportunity, he had to fight for it. However, the ancestor did not know the details and had no experience to learn from, so he could only ponder over it bit by bit. Tang Zheng's pure yang energy was accumulating more and more. He did not dare to delay any longer, so he said goodbye. The ancestor did not care about his departure. Instead, he looked at Xiaobai. The eagerness in his eyes could not be more obvious. They did not want Xiaobai to leave with Tang Zheng. Xiaobai did not think so much and said without hesitation, Master, then let's go back quickly. As soon as he said that, the ancestor could not wait to shout, Your Majesty, you can't. What's wrong? Your Majesty, you have already returned to sky beyond heaven. You are our backbone. If you leave, what will happen to us? Sky beyond heaven cannot be without you. After saying that, the ancestor was already in tears. Miwu also panicked. She looked at Xiaobai pitifully and said, Your Majesty, the ancestor is right. You can't leave. The heavens beyond heaven is your home. This, Xiaobai was stunned. He looked at them at a loss. He then looked at Tang Zheng. His eyes were filled with hesitation, not knowing what to do. He had never encountered this kind of problem before. Although he had only spent a short time with the ancestor and the others, his feelings were not shallow. Especially the ancestor and the others' loyalty to the royal family, he was deeply moved. Xiaobai, Tang Zheng suddenly called. Xiaobai looked at him awkwardly and said, Master, what should I do? When the ancestor and Mi Wu heard that, they looked at Tang Zheng at the same time. They were very clear about the influence Tang Zheng's opinion had on Xiaobai. If he did not let Xiaobai stay, then Xiaobai would almost certainly leave sky beyond heaven. Therefore, they became very nervous. They were very afraid that Tang Zheng would say what they were afraid of. Tang Zheng seemed to have sensed something. He looked at the ancestor and Mi Wu, hesitated for a moment, and said, Xiaobai, you belong to sky beyond heaven. You should stay. Although he said that, in his heart, he really hoped that Xiaobai would stay by his side. Xiaobai's relationship with him was like family. They were almost inseparable. If he took the initiative to let him leave, he would be very reluctant. When the ancestor and Mi Wu heard this, they both sighed in relief. The thing that they were most worried about did not happen. They looked at Tang Zheng with eyes full of gratitude. Without a doubt, Tang Zheng could have asked Xiaobai to leave, but he took the initiative to let him stay. This was completely taking care of their feelings. Xiaobai was stunned and said disappointedly, Master, you don't want me anymore? A strong sense of loss was revealed, causing people's hearts to involuntarily clench. Tang Zheng felt the same, and his heart clenched. He quickly explained, Xiaobai, that's not what I meant. You're my family. How could I not want you? You are the royal family of sky beyond heaven. You are their emperor. You are their backbone. They need you more than I do. This is the reason why I asked you to stay. Xiaobai's expression turned from gloomy to sunny. He then revealed a relieved smile and said, I knew that Master would not abandon me. Of course, but I can't bear to leave Master and the others. We will meet again. Moreover, don't you still have the ancestor and the others? They will accompany you well. In the following days, you need to use the heavenly palace and cultivate well. The next time we meet, your cultivation will surpass mine. Tang Zheng encouraged. How can I surpass Master? Master will definitely cultivate faster than me. Moreover, I plan to give this heavenly palace to Master. You need it more than me. Your Majesty, the ancestor was shocked. The heavenly palace was the heirloom of the royal family. To give it to an outsider like this was like being struck by lightning. Tang Zheng did not deserve it. How could he accept such a treasure? He immediately rejected it. Only then did the ancestor feel relieved. When I go back, I will find time to send Qi Weishan and his son back. Sky beyond heaven is their home. They are more suitable here. Tang Zheng took the initiative to say. Chapter 1542. The ultimate form of yuanying was cloning, which made Tang Zheng look forward to the future. This matter had to be considered in the long run, and it wouldn't be successful in a short period of time. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry and treated it with a calm heart. He looked deeply at the great ancestor and said meaningfully, "Great ancestor, you seem to have changed a lot during the time we were away." Changed a lot? Xiaobai was stunned, as if he didn't understand what Tang Zheng meant. The great ancestor looked meaningfully at Tang Zheng and asked, "What do you see? Your cultivation seems to have improved a little, but you haven't broken through the limits of your realm, so you're still at the fourth stage of the Great Ascension realm for the time being. You have a good eye." The great ancestor nodded and admitted Tang Zheng's words. "Since your Majesty recovered the bloodthirsty scepter, all of us have felt a change. That is, our cultivation stopped deteriorating, and after we cultivated for a while, our cultivation improved significantly. The great ancestor once said that many people's cultivation have been deteriorating unknowingly over the years. It was just a matter of time. Now, apart from the fog and the night, no one else could transform into human form." The meaning of the great ancestor's words was very obvious. Tang Zheng understood and exclaimed, "You mean your cultivation is improving, and you can transform into humans in the future?" The ancestor nodded excitedly, because this caused him to be unable to maintain his composure. Once the shackles on them were removed, then they would be like wild horses that had escaped their reins, and they would surely charge forward with indomitable will and would surely soar into the sky and reclaim their former glory. "Wow, that's great." Xiaobai was so surprised that he almost jumped up and cheered. "Great ancestor, why didn't you tell me this before? This is great news." Xiaobai complained. The great ancestor lowered his head and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, this is all our speculation. We haven't succeeded in the specifics yet, so we weren't in a hurry to tell you. Please understand, Your Majesty, we definitely didn't hide it on purpose." Xiaobai patted the old ancestor's body and comforted him. "Old ancestor, what are you saying? How can I not believe you? We also hope to give His Majesty a surprise one day." "Surprise? Yes, this is a huge surprise. I'm extremely happy." Xiaobai was so excited that he spoke incoherently. Tang Zheng was also very gratified. The more powerful the ancestor and the others were, the more they could assist Xiaobai in the future. When they left the house and came to the open waterfall, they looked back and saw that the waterfall was flowing down 3,000 feet. The cave was hidden behind a waterfall, and it really looked like a water curtain cave. Many of the others were cultivating in front of the waterfall, but there were also many people working. This central area had long been reclaimed, and it was the most fertile land in the world, producing all kinds of food. They were self-sufficient, so there were people carefully taking care of them every day. In the past few days, the wild dog had walked around the Suicide Valley. In a place that he did not dare to set foot in, there was actually such a scene, which often made him click his tongue in wonder. The old ancestor said that Tang Zheng was in seclusion, so he could not leave and could only stay here. At the same time, he was still a little confused, not knowing what would be waiting for him next. Suddenly, he saw Tang Zheng and the others coming out. His eyes were the most pleasing part of his ugly cheeks, firmly locked onto Tang Zheng, and flew to greet him. Tang Zheng was ready to leave this place when he suddenly saw the wild dog. His heart moved, and a plan came to his mind. The wild dog could not go back with Tang Zheng, and Kingsman was still in the barbarian land. He did not know what the current situation was, and he did not want Tian Chanzi to find that his sect had been destroyed when he arrived at the sky beyond sky in the future. That would be difficult for him to explain. Therefore, he wanted to send the wild dog back to the barbarian land to closely monitor the righteous path's movements, especially to find ways to protect Kingsman. At least, Kingsman could not be destroyed. If there was an emergency, he could ask for help from the Suicide Valley, and Xiao Bai would help him. The wild dog listened to the arrangement for himself, thought for a while, and did not refuse. He had no reason to refuse. He had already stepped on Tang Zheng's boat, and if he disembarked midway, he would be the one at a disadvantage. Even an idiot, after going through a series of things, should understand that Tang Zheng was extraordinary. Following him was much more beneficial than mingling with the righteous path. The emperor did not lack hungry soldiers, and Tang Zheng did not paint a picture of the future for the wild dog, but gave him real benefits. In the past, the wild dog's cultivation relied on piecing together skills, and did not learn and cultivate systematically, but he had the cultivation of yuaniying with his extraordinary talent. Of course, Tang Zheng knew the drawbacks of all these, so he generously imparted a set of skills to him. This was the skill that he had imparted to the Wu tribe, and it was obtained from the Langyu Pavilion. Although it was comparable to the Heavenly Tomes and the Ksitigarbha Sutra, it was definitely not ordinary. The righteous path loved to cherish their own skills and would never impart their own skills to outsiders. If anyone dared to steal it, they would be killed. The wild dog was restrained by this. It could do nothing but sigh from time to time. Now he had received the skills imparted by Tang Zheng and was really ecstatic. The joy came from the sky and almost made him faint. Since he was a child, he had been looked down upon and bullied countless times, and had long been used to people's indifference to him. This opportunity made him feel flattered. He was a person who knew how to repay kindness, and from then on, he was loyal to Tang Zheng, and would never be disloyal. In the Suicide Valley, under everyone's gaze, Tang Zheng stood on the somersault cloud, waved his hand, and rode the somersault cloud into the sky. Xiao Bai hurriedly rushed up, but could not touch the somersault cloud. He could only wave his hand and shout, "Master, I will help you in the future." Xiao Bai shouted loudly, especially the word master, which was particularly clear. The ancestor and the others had long been used to all this, and were not surprised. Instead, they watched the somersault cloud slowly rise into the sky. Looking at Xiao Bai chasing after the somersault cloud with a lonely and desolate expression, Tang Zheng felt the same way, and kept waving his arm, and said earnestly, "Xiao Bai, you cultivate well, and in the future I will help you to take back the sky beyond sky." Xiao Bai nodded heavily. "Well, master, I will wait for you. You must not leave me here alone and ignore me. I will always remember you. You are my family," Tang Zheng said with an emotional tone. Xiao Bai was so excited that tears welled up in his eyes, and he nodded his head like he was pounding garlic. The somersault cloud rose to the top of the sky, as if it was only a step away from the sky. Tang Zheng activated his divine technique, and with a wave of his hand, the spatial door slowly opened. Tang Zheng lowered his head and took a deep look. The figures on the ground were already very blurry, as small as ants. "Somersault cloud, go." With a command, the somersault cloud whizzed away and disappeared behind the spatial door. After a wave of fluctuations in the air, the spatial door closed and everything returned to calm. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1543. Crack. A bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, accompanied by the rumbling of thunder. This was a few thousand meters in the sky. A plane was passing through the thick clouds, flying past the lightning. A child's eyes widened as he looked out of the window and saw a magical scene. The sky was torn apart by that bolt of lightning, and it looked like a door. A person walked out of the door and happened to fall into the child's line of sight. The snack in the child's hand fell with a clatter, but he was oblivious to it. He jumped up in joy, but was held back tightly by the seatbelt. His sharp voice rang out in the cabin. Person, look at that person." His finger pointed straight out of the window. When the others heard this, they all looked sideways. However, The door had already disappeared, and that person had long disappeared without a trace. Everyone just thought that it was a child's prank. The person who walked out from behind the door was, of course, Tang Zheng. He easily passed through the spatial door and returned to his own world. Unexpectedly, this world was experiencing a thunderstorm. It was now winter, and the spring festival was approaching. However, the winter thunder was intermittent, and the weather was completely different from before. This world was subtly changing, and even the ordinary people felt this. Therefore, even if they saw lightning in the middle of winter, they were no longer surprised. This world was no longer the world they were familiar with. At least many ordinary people already knew about the existence of cultivators and understood that this was a powerful group. Some people who worshipped the strong were even looking for cultivators, hoping to be apprenticed to a master. Cultivators were not inferior to celebrities. Of course, there were too few cultivators, and many were unwilling to reveal their true identities. However, the more this was the case, the more mysterious cultivators were, and the more fascinating they were to ordinary people. As for the government, they still flatly denied and kept their mouths shut. They did not acknowledge the existence of cultivators. And as for the series of mysterious events that happened in the past, they would find some lame excuses to dodge. People had long been used to all of this, and they pretended not to hear it. You say you and I understand you and I don't interfere with each other. Tang Zheng stepped on the somersault cloud and looked down at the land beneath his feet. The capital city was a huge city. Several mysterious events had occurred in the capital city, and it had long become a topic of conversation for people. Even if Tang Zheng immediately landed on the street, no one would be surprised. It was more likely that they would crazily surround him like chasing a star and maybe ask for his autograph. Naturally, he would not do such a showy thing. Instead, he pressed down the cloud and landed outside his villa. The witches guarding the area had long recognized the somersault cloud and had already informed the people at home. He walked out of the rain toward his door. The rain formed a dome around him, and an invisible force. It was a spectacular scene. Master! A cheer came from behind as a fairy-like figure flew over and hugged Tang Zheng from behind. The word master reminded him of Xiao Bai, but the person who came was not Xiao Bai, but Ling Er. Ling Er and he had not seen each other for a long time. Ling Er had chosen a path that was completely different from other girls, and she was very focused on it, and her results were remarkable. Tang Zheng had experienced many crises and rarely involved Ling Er. She was like an ordinary person, working hard on her own career and focusing on the career she liked. Ling Er's entire body was pressed against Tang Zheng's back. He endured her impact and only felt a ball of softness on his back, making his heart flutter. She's grown up. He subconsciously sighed in his heart. Master, I haven't seen you in a long time. Ling Er missed you so much. Ling Er leaned her head against Tang Zheng's back. Feeling his broad back, she felt extremely at ease, as if she was leaning against the most peaceful harbor. Tang Zheng's lips curled into a faint smile and said, Ling Er, I missed you too. As he spoke, he turned around and looked at Ling Er face to face. They had not seen each other for a long time, and Ling Er had undergone earth-shattering changes. Other than the only thing that remained unchanged, she seemed to have matured a little and had a more feminine flavor, making her even more lovable. He could not help but sweat for the other female stars. With such an opponent, those so-called top female stars would not have an easy time. In fact, it was indeed so. Ling was like a fairy who had appeared out of nowhere, and all the so-called beauties in the entertainment circle were inferior. In terms of beauty, few could compare. Even if there were people who could compare to her, they did not have her spiritual and immortal aura. She was like a fairy who did not eat the food of mortals, making people unable to have the thought of competing with her. Of course, there were still people who would compete with her, but Ling was signed to Tang Zheng's own company. The company completely sheltered her from the wind and rain and did not cause her much trouble. Before, Tang Zheng's only condition for her to enter the entertainment circle was that she had to maintain her original heart. If her original heart was tainted by the dirty entertainment circle, then the gains would not make up for the losses. Wow, Ling has become beautiful. Tang Jing opened his mouth wide and deliberately exaggerated. Ling shyly lowered her head and then slowly raised her head. She blinked her big, watery eyes and said, "Really? Of course it's true," Tang Jing said with a serious face. Although Ling did not lose her original heart, but after all, she had seen and experienced more, and her mind had matured a lot. She was no longer the ignorant girl from before. She looked at Tang Jing with a red face and said, "Master has also become more handsome." Ha ha ha. Tang Jing was stunned for a moment and then laughed out loud. He gently stroked her hair and said, "Ling even knows how to praise people. You have really grown up." While they were talking, the others also came out of the room. Seeing this warm scene, no one came to disturb them, although they also wanted to talk to him. Ling poked her head out from Tang Jing's embrace, looked at the others, and stuck out her tongue and said, "Master, if I continue to occupy you, my sisters won't let me off." The others laughed involuntarily, and Yi Ding Dang said straightforwardly, "Linger, you are becoming more and more eloquent. You even know how to joke with us." Ling is speaking the truth. I am not joking. Linger stuck out her tongue and said sincerely. Her big watery eyes seemed to be able to speak. "Ling, if your fans saw your cute appearance, I'm afraid their hearts would melt." Fong Shishir teased. Ling Er's face became even redder. She was even more attractive than a ripe apple, and even women could not help but feel their hearts palpitate. Ling intimately held onto Tang Jing's arm and hid in his embrace. She secretly looked at Fong Shishir and said coquettishly, "Big sister is also making fun of me." While they were talking and laughing, the rain in the sky did not stop, but the rain had no way of penetrating the space. Chapter 1544. Inside the villa, there was laughter and joy, and the atmosphere was harmonious. Everyone was happy for Tang Jing's return. However, as there were too many girls around, it was obvious that there were more females than males. Tang Jing had become the center of attention. Almost every girl chatted with Tang Jing for a while before they calmed down. Otherwise, their resentful gazes would be enough to make Tang Jing suffer. Where's His Majesty? Why didn't he come back? Before Tang Jing could tell them what happened to Grandmaster Beyond Heaven, someone had already asked him. That person was none other than the Red Lunar Beast. He had been looking for Xiao Bai all this while. However, he could not find him at all. He could not help but feel anxious. He knew how dangerous Grandmaster Beyond Heaven was. He was worried that Xiao Bai might have met with some mishap. His eyes were filled with anxiety. He stayed in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven. Oh, what? Why would His Majesty stay in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven? What happened? The Red Lunar Beast misunderstood and shouted in shock. Don't worry. Don't worry. Tang Jing quickly waved his hand and signaled the Red Lunar Beast to calm down. Xiao Bai met the Patriarch, who was your guardian back then, and the other subordinates. Therefore, he stayed in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven to fight with them. Guardian? The Red Lunar Beast's eyes twitched. Is he still alive? Back then, the Red Lunar Beast was the Red Lunar Beast General. He had parted ways with the Patriarch and lost contact with him. The Patriarch hid in Suicide Valley to recuperate. The Red Lunar Beast thought that the Patriarch had died. Seeing the Red Lunar Beast's impatience, the rest of the people stared at Tang Jing curiously. Tang Jing took the opportunity to tell them what happened in Grandmaster Beyond Heaven. Everyone's hearts trembled with fear as they listened, especially when they heard that Heavenly King Hao had faked his death. The Red Lunar Beast was furious and shouted, "Despicable!" In the past, he had heard the news of Hao Tianwang's death. That was why he had tried his best to destroy his enemy. However, King Wuling was not someone to be trifled with, and he had a large number of helpers. In the end, the Red Lunar Beast was utterly defeated. He had no choice but to leave his hometown and search for the whereabouts of the royal family. The villa was completely silent. Only the heavy breathing of the Red Lunar Beast could be heard. Little Yu could feel her father's mood. She obediently snuggled up to him and squeaked softly. Tang Jing coughed and broke the silence. He comforted Red Lunar Beast, no, Red Lunar Beast General, I will find a day to send you back to Grandmaster beyond heaven. I will let you and your former comrades reclaim the glory that belongs to you under the leadership of Xiao Bai. The Red Lunar Beast suddenly raised his head. His eyes shone brightly. He mumbled to himself, as if he was possessed. Red Lunar. General, it has been a long time since someone called me that. I am ashamed of the title of General bestowed upon me by the late Emperor. After he finished speaking, he actually burst into tears and prostrated himself deeply on the ground. His body trembled, causing everyone to be moved. Little Yu was a loss. She was patting her father with her little paws, as if she was comforting him. Tang Zheng heaved a heavy sigh and said, Red Lunar Beast General, don't blame yourself. Let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones. We have to focus on the future. We will take back what we have lost little by little. The Red Lunar Beast slowly raised his head. Although there were still tears in his eyes, he gradually stopped moving. Like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed, he nodded heavily and said through gritted teeth, Yes, we must take it back. He was full of vigor. He seemed to have regained the demeanor and aura of a general. Tian Chanzi looked anxious. This was because he had heard news about his sect. After the Red Lunar Beast finished speaking, he could not wait to ask, Brat, you said that the distinct Void sect almost suffered a calamity of annihilation and suffered grievances from the righteous faction. What exactly happened? Fang Shishir was Tian Chanzi's disciple. She was also a member of Kingsman. She looked at Tang Zheng at the same time. She was worried about the safety of her sect. Tang Zheng knew that they would have this question. He told them about the time he and Xiao Bai used their divine senses to travel to the outer sky and help Kingsman to scare off their enemies. Tian Chanzi sighed and said, Young man, you have a conscience. If you don't save them, I will teach you a lesson. Tang Zheng sneered. In the past, Tian Chanzi might have been able to teach Tang Zheng a lesson. Now, Tian Chanzi was no match for Tang Zheng. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. However, their relationship was not ordinary. Tang Zheng was used to Tian Chanzi's tone and did not find it strange. Tian Chanzi hesitated and said, Kingsman is my sect. I will not allow the righteous sects to ostracize my sect. The next time you go to the outer sky, you must take me with you. I will stand up for my sect and let the righteous sects know that Kingsman is not to be trifled with. Even if Kingsman has declined, I will not allow them to bully Kingsman. Tian Chanzi was filled with righteous indignation. He looked like he was ready to go all out. Tang Zheng laughed. You are their senior. They are your disciples. When the time comes, you will be able to show off in front of them. Tian Chanzi looked angry. He glared at Tang Zheng and corrected him. I have always been very impressive. Master, when the time comes, I will also go. Fang Shishir volunteered. Tian Chanzi was overjoyed. He laughed and praised. That's my good disciple. There were many things to do in the world. He was not in a hurry to go to the outer sky. He could only comfort them. Did anything happen while I was gone? Tang Zheng asked with a serious expression. After Li Xiaoyan's cultivation improved, he reorganized the Li Palace and sorted out the intelligence system. Not only did he improve the overall cultivation and strength of the disciples of the Li Palace, but he also improved the intelligence system greatly. Li Xiaotian restrained her smile and said in a methodical manner, The Li Palace has been secretly monitoring the situation in various places. After the battle in the capital, it was calm and peaceful. Whether it was the government or other forces, they all ceased their activities and did not stir up any more waves. Tang Zheng nodded. The capital was his headquarters. Almost all the people he cared about were in the capital. If the capital was in turmoil, they would definitely be affected. This was what he cared about the most. Li Xiaotian understood him very well, so he first reported the situation in the capital to put him at ease. The Empyrean fairy left the capital to find a body for the Emperor of Heaven to return to life. Ever since she left the capital, she has disappeared. Her strength is too high, and she is alone. The disciples of the Li Palace cannot keep up with her, nor can they provide her with protection. Li Xiaotian said with shame. He felt that the Li Palace really needed to increase its strength. Otherwise, this kind of embarrassing situation would happen again and again. It was truly too shameful. Tang Zheng did not mind. After all, the Empyrean fairy was an expert of the Mayana realm. How could an ordinary disciple of the Li Palace keep up with her? Yin Xingyi is still missing. I don't know if she is hiding somewhere to continue comprehending the heavenly Tao. Li Xiaotian said with a frown. After Yin Xingyi used a talisman to unexpectedly escape from Tang Zheng's hands, she disappeared without a trace, as if she had evaporated into thin air. Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows, and his expression became serious. Whether Yin Xingyi was a friend or a foe, he really could not tell at the moment. With such an opponent lurking in the shadows, he felt a great deal of pressure. Then what about Dianan? Tang Jing took a deep breath and asked again. This was the first enemy he had prepared to deal with. After the battle in the capital, Ji Wuxiang had fled back to Dianan. Therefore, before he left, he had ordered that the wind and grass in Dianan must be closely monitored. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.